Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the Theater Enthusiast podcast. As always, Hot Priest is here representing out of my mug and my candle. I I already told this to the guests, but I am truly honored and cannot believe they said yes to doing this. I feel like I say that every podcast, but I have been a longtime admirer of their work. Um, I didn't even tell you this, but you were actually my favorite history boy.
Ah,
Um,
yes. Strike
was kind of
one.
upset like you weren't nominated for a Tony, just putting it out there for playing Scripps. Please
Nah.
welcome Olivier Award-winning actor known as Harry Potter, Scripps and the History Boys, Jamie Parker. I had an app on my phone that nobody could hear applause for, so now I just have to do it
Thank you. Thank you.
manually.
I'm giving a very urbane, louche wave to the audience as I take my seat next to your desk with
Yes,
with the
yes,
city skyline behind us.
yes. Which I do kind of have, but not if you stick your head out my window and look to the right, you can see New Jersey. So
Excellent.
there is that. There
Everything
is
is
that.
legal in New Jersey.
Apparently, I have no idea. I don't live there. So I have a friend who lives there, and she's Italian and from New Jersey, and she just had a baby. And she's like, would be getting like a leopard print like baby carrier be too cold? It's like you're an Italian from New Jersey. It's a rite of passage
Yeah,
to have
I
like a
think there's standard
leopard.
issue, isn't it? They're like,
Yeah,
you get one of those in the mail.
yeah, leopard and glitter.
Yeah,
So there we go. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm sorry
my
that
pleasure.
I'm fangirling, but I just, again, I'm very excited that you're here. Again, longtime admirer of your work. So I always like to start with, where are you from?
I am from a little town in the northeast of England called Darlington. I was born down the road in a place called Middlesbrough, which is kind of theatre reference would be Billy Elliot. That's where Billy Elliot's from.
Yeah.
Um, though I can't. Uh, I wasn't from the same kind of background as Billy Elliot. My dad was a solicitor, and my mum was a teacher, and we lived. My parents still live in Darlington, but then when I was about 12, just turned 12, I went up to boarding school in Scotland, um, and used to. And then here comes the Harry Potter bit because I used to hang around in the same places that J.K. Rowling was writing her books in the early mid 90s. There was a place called Nicholson's, which was over the road from the Festival Theatre, and there was the Elephant House and the Travis Theatre bar. And I had, believe it or not, I had a little set of round glasses and floppy hair. But uh, that was sort of my 90s, and then I came down to London and went to drama school and cracked on.
And here we are. So
Here we
what
are.
got you interested in theater and performing?
Well, I grew up watching my parents doing local amateur dramatics, which is, always a kind of, I think for better or worse, is always a core memory of any child who grew up with Amdram in the house. Um, but it was like a sort of cornerstone of my childhood's just sort of music and sound and just part of the community was this sort of yearly or twice yearly adventure that my parents would go on, and I would get to. It was always that transition between the sort of glamour of front and house with the plush red velvet and the gold brocade, and then the access door by the side of the auditorium where you go backstage where everyone was dressed in black and had headphones on and there were ropes on the walls and the dressing rooms with sort of general sort of hysteria and hilarity happening backstage, and that that sort of Narnian wardrobe kind of effect of going from the sort of the weirdly sort of glamorous place where you were just receiving the magic to going backstage where there was that weird tension between total disillusionment and yet the real magic was happening where the artifice was fully revealed. I don't
Mm.
know, that just was really just part of my childhood, but I had no interest in getting on stage at all. My sister would perform, and I just you couldn't have got me on stage at all. And then I think something happened when I went away to boarding school, where you're now separated from everything that you know and all your familiarity. So you shop around for a new place to belong, for that sense of belonging. And some people find it in team sports or in politics or whatever. Um, and I suppose it was inevitable that I found it in theatre. But it wasn't. I was having this conversation just recently with a teacher friend of ours, actually, that there is always a sort of paradox that it's the thing that you're weakest at, or the thing that's perhaps less available to you, which ends that you have to work harder at, which ends up becoming a strength. And I was privileged to go to this very, very good school that had a lot of very good resources. But one of the things that was really kind of not really on offer was drama. There wasn't a GCSE in drama, which is the sort of the exams that you take when you're about 15, 16. There wasn't an A level, which is your the one you take just as you graduate high school or college. I'm not sure what you guys call it.
SAT, ACT.
SAT, yeah, there wasn't an SAT sort of level exam in drama. So what that meant was that there was a small group of us who, we loved theatre and we knew we wanted to do it. And I definitely knew at that point that I was going to spend my life doing it. But if we were going to do it, then we had to do it ourselves. So we had to raise money. We had to design the programs and write the copy. We had to beg, borrow, and steal all the materials for props and costumes and sets. We had to focus the lights ourselves. We had to, and then learn the lines and direct it and all the rest of it. There was one yearly school production, and I had two teachers who were amazing. Two teachers in particular, although there were more. It was Kath Philp, who is now a frontline correspondent. Who was my English teacher and also directed me in my first play, which was Amadeus. And
What a first play to be in.
I know. And then there was my music teacher, Neil Metcalf, who was just an extraordinary music teacher who managed to get us all through GCSE music in sort of half the allotted time and got us all A's just by being a brilliant teacher, kind of thing. And those sort of things, that sort of foundation, I think, gave us the confidence to be able to take this stuff on ourselves. And just looking back, it was just madness. It was that confidence of youth thing of just. Now I know that it's quite complicated putting on a play. It involves a lot of things, and there's an awful lot of things that need to go right, and an awful lot of things, an equal amount of things that can go horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when it does go wrong, you're going wrong in public, in front of everybody. And that's even harder in front of your peers, I think, at a kind of formative adolescent age. But I just didn't give a shit, I think. I sort of, or at least, I don't know, there was this kind of just sort of reckless, I'm going to do it anyway kind of thing, which, yeah, but just that thing of just sort of throwing yourself into it and learning on the job and getting a lot of stuff wrong. And then the sort of hysterical madness of when things go right, was the real hook. I don't think I'm ever going to forget the moment when it really clicked was when, because it was a sort of marginal occupation, it wasn't a mainstream thing to do, and it was quite a sports-led school, quite conventional in the sense of, there was sort of gold letters on the boards of, the people that you'd go to Whitehall or Sandhurst, you'd go into the city or the armed forces, or that kind of thing. And so doing theatre was a bit not too cool. And there was we had a dress rehearsal for a show we were trying to put on, and a few of the jocks and the idiots turned up to sort of hamstring us and just sort of generally sabotage it and get in the way. And that was sort of pretty bleak and depressing, and it wasn't looking good at all. But something, no thanks to me, but there was something clicked in that company where everyone went kind of, right, fuck this, it's all or nothing, and they went on stage, and I saw those guys who'd come along and sat in the front row deliberately to kind of um just laugh at it. um and I saw girls from the music department who weren't cool, who played, were very good at the violin, but weren't one of the cool kids, just totally own the space and their the confidence of their performance, and took it to them and brought the house with them and totally won over the house just by sheer kind of front-footedness.
Mhm.
And these people who had decided that they were actively not going to suspend their belief and actively not buy into the theatre contract thing, um, were totally disarmed and totally transformed, and despite themselves enjoyed this performance. And it went diametrically the other way from the way we thought it was going to go. And instead of being a total disaster, it was a roaring success. And I think that was the moment when I saw what it can do.
Yeah.
And it's much bigger than any one person involved. And there's no real way of it. I've never been able to really to explain that.
Yeah.
And I've seen it a handful of times in my life, an extraordinarily transformative moment,
Yeah.
which is utterly robust. It's as strong as anything I've ever encountered,
Yeah.
and it's practically alchemical. It's just an extraordinary thing, a powerful thing. But of course, 99% of it isn't that. It's nuts and bolts, and it's the mundane, humdrum, everyday
Mhm.
kind of aspect of just putting a show together. But that's the dragon that you chase, I think.
Mhm.
If you have a taste of that early on. I don't know if anybody else recognizes that, but that was my experience anyway.
Well, that was so great that you experienced that at such an early age, because sometimes people don't experience that until later. I mean, my high school experience with theater was very different than yours, but yeah, I didn't
You
have that.
had you it was like Glee, was it, when you
Oh no, my high school drama teacher didn't like me for some reason, and I call her the spawn of Satan. But I also found out recently at a friend's wedding that she no longer teaches high school drama. So it's
ah,
probably like the best thing I've ever heard. And if
right.
I'm ever feeling down or just like not having a good moment in life, I just remember that fact and I feel much better. But
Satan is overcome and vanquished in this one place.
it's ironically like when I don't like someone, I call them Voldemorts. But for her, she's Satan. Other two people that I've encountered in my life are male and female Voldemorts. But besides the fact, but that's incredible that you experienced that at such a young age. And that's also just a really great example of, the power of theater and that it can affect all different types of people. And, even as you were saying that, you don't experience that all the time, but there could be one person in the audience who does feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really, I'm not sure what happens as time goes on. You sort of, I think, I definitely had that experience very early on, and I recognized it, and I knew it was definitely my sort of North Star. But there was an aspect of dragon chasing about it, because every time it wasn't that, which
Mhm,
of course was almost every time,
mhm,
it really hurt. It felt like a failure. Now I know that it was just sort of classic perfectionistic thinking.
mhm.
Um, but really, anything less than sort of 97% um, felt like it might as well have been a flat out zero.
Yeah,
Um, and that there was no, it was wasted time, and it was futile and pointless, and worthless,
mhm.
terrible, pointless. What's this shit? Why am I doing this? And I don't know, I don't think I'm the only one who's come up through into this business who's had that sentiment. But you learn over time, perhaps, I hope anyway, to carry that I don't think that feeling changes particularly, but you learn to wear it a bit more lightly, and you learn to you're a bit more accepting, I think, and also I think you come to understand that um the more consciously and actively you try to go after it, the more you get in your own way, and the less likely it is to actually facilitate something like that happening. And that really uh, it's got a lot in common with Zen practice. I think that sort of do learn not doing, and everything falls into place. That the harder you grip, um, the clunkier the performance gets. And that really, if you can just let go and play, it's called a play. And if you can wear it lightly and just not just piss about, but have that combination of relaxation and concentration, then you're into sort of more fertile ground, and the magic seems to come more easily.
Yeah.
You go through patches, but and also over the course of a run of a single show, you go through patches. You'll have a week where you go, oh my God, it's just there. It's just there. It's completely available. And
Yeah.
then you'll go through a stretch where it seems to have totally gone, and it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you do. And then of course you get into that loop of trying not to try, and it still doesn't work because you're still trying.
Yeah.
And that's infuriating, and I don't know if anybody else feels that's this way, but my feeling is that most runs of shows have on that score and that sort of relationship of the work coming and going and having its own life and availability that you can't seem to kind of actively control, that it seems to have a similar kind of pattern, no matter how long or short the run of a show is. You can just be on for a couple of weeks, or you can be doing a years long commercial contract, but you'll sort of have the same relationship over the course of the life of the show. It's just stretched.
Yeah.
So of course what that means is you'll have your good patches will perhaps you'll be able to count on more fingers. But the barren patches, oh my God, I'd have only ever done Cursed Child, we did 2-year-long contracts, one in London and one in New York. And of course, History Boys, we were on for a long time. But it's easy to feel over those where you kind of go, oh my God, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Like, this life is never ever going to be anything other, which of course is the total lie. There's this weird thing where you think when you're in a show and you think, these are the only people I'm ever going to work with. And this is the rest of my life. Or similarly, you get to the end of a show and you think, I'm never going to see these people ever again.
Yeah.
Or I'm never going to do this material again. Both of which are not true. I've found myself coming around into the same show again, or working with the same people again, not necessarily on the same show, but on a different show. And you kind of go, oh yeah, of course. It's these illusions that we sort of buy into for no reason at all. I don't. Yeah, sorry, I've waffled down. I've drifted off a little bit. Bring me back on. Bring me back
No,
on
it's all
track,
good.
quick.
I'm enjoying you talking about all of this stuff, but it's interesting that you mentioned, especially with like long run, shorter runs. So something like the History Boys, you did it for such a long time, but you also did it in so many different countries. So was
Yeah,
that the same, because you did it in China, you did it in New Zealand, New York,
yeah,
London, Australia, if memory serves me
yeah. That's right.
correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's dead right. We did. Yeah, we sort of we did a year in London in rep. We were sort of the spine at the National Theatre that Nick would wrap his seasons around, which wasn't initially the plan. It was just going to be, I don't know, 60 performances or something, but then it just sort of kept going. And then in the second year, we didn't really do anything apart from film the film. And then, yes, it was in the third year we went, we did a couple of weeks at the National before we went to Hong Kong for a week, and then Wellington in New Zealand for a week. And then we were 5 weeks in Sydney. That was lovely. And then, yeah, 6 months, 20 weeks with a 4-week extension in New York, where so after over 2 years of doing that play, where my bear in mind this was right at the beginning of my career, and
Yeah.
my CV. Now that second year, like I said, I only had 1 month's work, and that was when we filmed the film.
Hmm.
Uh, I didn't work at all as an actor outside of that, so my CV didn't get a syllable longer. So after those 2 years of coming back again to the same material,
Hmm.
and then doing the heaviest schedule that we'd ever done on
Hmm.
that material, because we'd never done 8 shows a week
Yeah.
up to that point, and suddenly here we are doing 6 months worth of which, you know, at the beginning of a performance process on a show, relationship with a show, is a tricky enough thing to navigate. But to do it after 2 years of already having not done anything else, yeah, that was something uh, to figure out as we went along, and we were a cross section, a variety of of types and temperaments in that group.
Yeah.
So there were those who had I think I'd probably say that I had one of the higher thresholds for repetition, because I was sort of from that tradition, that was sort of just the practice of turning up, and I sat at Richard Griffith's feet very
Mhm.
much. I would wonder at Richard's ability to finesse the same inflection on the same line each night. He didn't do anything wildly different with it,
Mhm.
but he somehow managed to, with this tiny fine tuning, finesse it each night to make it sound like it was the first time he was thinking those thoughts. And I was fascinated by that. But then we had others, such as James Corden, who had a much lower boredom threshold.
Yeah.
Um,
I think one
uh,
night I saw the show, he like pulled his cell phone out of his pocket to like turn it off or something, like put it back in. Yeah.
yeah, that happened. I remember it. Um,
Yeah.
but we all hit that point at some point of going, I can't say these lines out
Yeah.
loud in again in this order. Like they've stopped meaning anything by this point. I just and you become a version of your own performance.
Hmm.
Um, and that's hard. I don't know what the answer is on that score. That it is a business. It is a show business,
Yeah.
and the only way theatre really is valid in its current form is to do it enough uh, times to facilitate selling enough tickets for it to make its money back.
Oh, the
Um,
stories we can talk about with New York theater currently. So,
yeah,
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 I had brunch with two of my best friends yesterday, and I'm hopefully making a trip to London in May. And we were
great.
talking about shows that I could possibly see. And I said, it's very hard to see something that's currently playing in London that I can't see in New York. And then they were talking about how much cheaper theater tickets are in London as opposed to New York. And now it's like the conversation of, not theaters aren't really saying that they're not really selling as well as they are. And I've also said post pandemic, I'm curious to see what theater pricing is going to be like because, during the pandemic, a lot of people lost
Yeah.
their jobs, not making the money that they used to.
Well, the
And
National Theatre has just announced that it's going to reduce its activity.
yeah,
Um, it's everyone's having to adapt. Cursed Child has adapted the entire format
yeah,
of its show.
yeah.
Uh,
I saw the new production that they just released where it's just the
one part.
one part, yeah. And they changed. I saw you in the show twice, and I think I saw it 4 times, 3 times. I saw it a few times, the two-parters. But they also changed like bits and pieces of the story, not to give anything away.
Right.
Um, but I don't know if I mean, you're so far removed from it
I
now.
haven't I haven't seen it in its new
Yeah.
format. I mean,
But
uh
I don't think the new format's in London though. I think London.
no, I think, as I understand it, London's the one place where it's still in two parts. But other people know more about that than I do. But it would it would certainly have changed my entire relationship with the show and with the performance schedule.
Yeah.
Um, um, but like I say, you adapt or die.
Yeah.
And that was sort of never truer than this particular time in the history of theatre. So,
Yeah.
um, it can be, um, who knows actually what the next few years are going to produce, because the sort of the seismic shunt underneath technology,
Mhm.
communication technology that was I was going to say granted or gifted by the weirdness of worldwide lockdown,
Mhm.
um has who knows what that's going to produce in terms of usable communication technology in a live setting, or in an immediate performable setting. The blending between uh just the acoustic actor in an acoustic space,
Mhm.
and however many different layers of technological intervention on top that you want to use. My family just got back. I haven't seen it myself, but they've got back from seeing the ABBA Voyage
Mhm.
um, show, and then you've got AI models, and you've got AI um, uh,
The multi.
voice actors doing automatic reading of whatever text that you punch in, or to do whatever corporate presentation you need to do to deliver your information about your new product or whatever it is. It does make me go, okay, how long have we got?
Yeah.
um but then I think in the same way that um now who was it who said, I think it was Matt Haig who said this, that in a hectic and hysterical and sort of hectoring time, being calm is punk as fuck. So maybe, you know, try being punk, as in, not playing that game. And similarly, I think the phenomenon of just the actor in the empty space speaking, and being able to speak in all simplicity, just stand there and speak a truth. Um, well, look at any of the top 10 TED Talks most watched. They all kind of have that in common.
Mhm.
um if you look at the greatest preachers, good church has got everything in common with good theatre, because of course they've got the same provenance anyway. But a good preacher who's able to just, doesn't matter how flamboyant they are or not, there's a
Yeah.
simplicity to it,
Mhm.
and it doesn't require any um bells and whistles beyond the ability to just stand there and speak your truth. And of course, as Groucho said, if you can fake that, you got it made. um and there are a lot of attempts to fake that. Um, Most of it is fakery. Um, most of my attempts to fake it have failed, and then every now and again, even in the good ones, the so-called good ones, the ones that have been best received, most performances of the good ones have, as far as going back to that perfectionist thinking, have not got over the bar in my personal judgment. But I learned to suspend that over time, and kind of go, don't don't do that. Just let it be whatever it is. And then every now and again, something happens. I was probably, I don't know, five, less than 10 times in my life there have been these moments, these evenings where you go, yeah, I can't. It's beyond my capacity to describe what just happened in words in a way that will communicate that experience to someone who wasn't there.
Mhm.
But I know it happened, and I'm never ever going to forget it.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think you need technology for that.
Yeah.
Certainly, it didn't seem to be involved in any of mine. So I say mine, they weren't really to do with me. I just happened to have been there, you know. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I think, theater, they have to adapt, but, depending on how it's adapted, it could work and sometimes it doesn't work. So that's just
Sure.
my feelings of it. So let's go further back in time. So you were graduating from boarding school and you went to RADA, correct? Or am I?
Eventually, yeah, it took me
Yeah.
3 years to get in.
Oh,
Took me
good.
three goes. That's sort of, I think, going back to what we were saying about um, your weaknesses and your failures end up being your strength. I definitely came out of school with a lot of entitlement. And well, of course I'm going to go to RADA. I'm me. Um, and I went along. I was only 17 years old and went along and didn't get past the first round. Um, and absolutely rightly so. I wouldn't have put me through either. Um, and then I was like, oh, okay, fine. So there was never any question about not applying again. It was just I was sort of in stasis for a year, and
Yeah.
then which was boring and rubbish. Um, because I was so sort of single-minded and monomaniacal and fixated on this one path, that that it never occurred to me to take advantage of the time and, I don't know, go traveling or go and do something else for a bit.
Mm.
This was it. This was the thing. So a year later, it came around again, and I did apply to one other college as well, just for backup, but I didn't really mean it. And again, didn't get into either of them.
Oh, wow.
So it's like the drama school thing had gone no, and then it had gone no, capitals underlined, um, which was a real moment. So then it was a kind of, oh fuck, now what do I do? So I went to university for want of anything rather than staying in my parents' house, which was a terrible idea. My parents dropped me off at university, and we all know I'm going to be home at Christmas, right? We know this isn't going to work out,
Yeah.
but here we are anyway. And I did 2 months of philosophy with film studies and classical Greek in Aberdeen because it was literally the only thing I'd missed clearing by that point. So it was the only thing on offer. So I went and did that, and then yeah, left. And I went and I basically just moved to London, and I slept on my best mate's easy chair, um who was already at Lambda by that point. um and he and I had done plays together at school. Going back to Amadeus, I was Mozart, he was Salieri. And I just and I applied basically to every drama school in the United Kingdom at that point. I went, okay, fine, right, fine.
Mhm.
So it's not the RADA thing. um Fine, but it's going to be the drama school thing. So I applied to RADA as well
Mhm.
because I was applying to everywhere. It cost a fortune.
Yeah.
Um, and I went up to Glasgow to RSAMD, and I went over to Bristol and all the places in London and Guildford, and just went and just applied to everywhere. And it was really interesting because I didn't go how I thought it was going to go. Um, uh, I was For instance, I was one college offered me a place after just one round of auditions, which immediately made me go, "Oh well, I don't want to go there." That was too easy.
Yeah.
Um, and then there was another one where I thought, okay, I probably will do quite well at this one because it feels like the right kind of place, and didn't get it. And then against all my expectations, it came to the RADA thing, and fuck me, I got in. And go into a couple of other places as well, because by that point I'd had the corners knocked off me, and I was ready to. I was starting to be malleable,
Yeah.
starting to be available, um, rather than, I don't know who the hell I thought I was, somewhere between Kenneth Branagh and Laurence Olivier probably. Um, uh, but it's but you know, but again, who I who I was when I went there, and the ambitions that I had, and the clarity of that I had of what I wanted to do when I left. By the time I did leave, it totally changed. My priorities had completely changed, and I was heading in a totally different direction. So it's yeah. I don't think I did very well at actually answering your question there, but that was what happened going to drama school.
No, it's fine. Do you think your experience at RADA humbled you as an actor?
Um, I certainly think I had more than my fair share of youthful confidence, to the point of cockiness and arrogance. Um, but um, I learned enough. Um, I learned enough to realize that uh, that cockiness and arrogance was all a smokescreen for um, for the insecurity that you feel
Mhm.
inherently doing this kind of stuff, and um, and ultimately the process of coming to terms with that and handling it in a healthy way and in a creative way and in a productive way is coming round to the point of humility, of being able to okay, for a start, this isn't all about me. I'm just one small part of a much larger machine. There was a thing, one of my big, I really wish we'd had a chance to do this at my college, because I learned at the time that they used to do it, but they no longer did it by the time I was there. And I still wish that we had. There used to be a thing at that college where every, like in second year or something like that, there would be one production where the actors would stage manage it, and the stage management students would perform it.
Interesting.
And I absolutely loved that idea, because I had done a bit of crew work, and I'd done a few various different jobs backstage, in around the theatre, and had slowly got my head around what other people are trying to do as part of their place in the production, and um, that leads you to not do that thing, like there's still, and I've got to say, I think it's probably less pronounced in London or in the UK, although it does still happen occasionally. But I saw it more, I think, in America. There's this the hierarchy, a departmental hierarchy, and there are certain departments which get talked at or ordered about at like their servants. Like the costume department, your dresser is not your chambermaid.
Yeah.
And like there's a famous quote. I'd never know exactly if it's exactly true, but it's ascribed to Kathy Burke, and she's great. But it's along the lines of: learn your lines, brush your teeth, hang up your costume, don't be a cunt. Just be don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a job to do,
Yeah. I used
and
to,
they're all here to make you look good.
yeah. I used to do merch at Broadway shows, and I was working one show towards the end of its run. And this was a show that was in London and came to New York. And towards the end of the run, we don't do discounted merchandise for cast and crew because that the company's going to lose money. I was getting yelled at by one of the cast members because I wouldn't give her a discount on a t-shirt. So much to the fact that she got the stage manager and the company manager involved.
Right.
And they were to me, they're like, "No, you're right. She's wrong."
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm
I
just
mean,
a
if you've been
little
told
person.
something else, then that's a different thing. But no, if you're just expect that's entitlement. If you're just
Yeah.
assuming,
And they're like, I had to take a pay cut to come here. And I was like, I
I,
can't help you.
I don't handle the contracts. I'm
It's
sorry.
like,
I'm not.
I'm just a merch person.
I'm not your agent. Yeah, I
Sorry,
literally
I can't give you a discount on a t-shirt.
I don't have any bargaining power here. Like, by all means, continue to get pissed, but you're going to
Yeah.
achieve precisely nothing. The problem is that at that point, they know it, and so there's only one way to go, which is double down on the awful behavior,
Yeah.
and which at some point in our lives we've all done. We've
Yeah.
all, we've all been caught out, and been embarrassed and doubled down on the awful behavior instead of going, you know what? Because it takes self-possession and a certain measure of calmness
Yeah.
and distance to be able to do that. And we all like to think that we could do that, but of course it's, you know.
Yeah. I will say that was like probably there was one other experience I had at, and I've talked about it many times on the podcast. I was at a Mamma Mia after party. Like, and again, this is Mamma Mia.
Yeah,
So it's not like the
King Lear.
hits boys on Broadway, or something like that. And this actor came into the show, and I was very excited that they were coming into the show, and they were in one of my favorite musicals of all time. And I went up to him at the party and I said, you were in my favorite musical. I don't remember specifically what I said, but he was such a fucking asshole to me. And I was like,
Yeah, it's just it's
but I will say,
yeah,
like, besides those two experiences, like 99.9% of like people I have met working in the theater have been lovely.
that's
So
the
it's
thing.
like very few things. And during the pandemic, you were talking about how you do theater and all that. So for those who have listened to the podcast, have heard me say this many times, I directed virtual play readings during
Right.
the pandemic.
Great.
So everybody who I worked with was lovely. So, and we even talked about like, don't be an asshole behind the scenes. Like, people are just happy to be there performing. So it's
Yeah.
very rare that that does happen, but I have experienced it.
Yeah, there was a lovely article which I was like, which was just immensely heartwarming, by a London theatre critic called Lynn Gardner, who after Cursed Child first came out, just wrote. It wasn't a review. She was writing sort of generally, but using Cursed Child as a kind of
Mhm.
um, illustration of it, of just how theatre is the ultimate collaborative art form,
Yeah.
and you can't do it without anywhere between
Mhm.
a handful of people and 200 people um, working in concert with each other,
Yeah.
and doing their own job uh, as well as they can for the sake of something bigger than themselves, and how when it in that initial run, and then that the excitement of that opening, that Cursed Child was a good illustration of that, because it wasn't about so and so as such and such in.
Yeah.
It wasn't about marquee names. It wasn't about anything other than a phenomenal number of people
Yeah.
um, doing an awful lot of hard work, for the most part
Mhm.
in the dark and anonymously,
Yeah.
and relentlessly as well. It was a
To be
very,
special.
very unforgiving work schedule for most of the people involved on that show. Still
Yeah.
is. And it hangs on an abstract feeling of this work being worth doing for its own sake.
Mhm.
And if you lose that, then you've lost your currency, basically, has bottomed out. And most people in theatre, I think, most people in the arts generally understand that and agree with it, and try to embody it, and try to live up to that. Um, but of course, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the archetype, the stereotype, is of the, how does an actor put a light bulb in? It just stands there and lets the world revolve around them. And I want, a glass bowl with exclusively pink M&Ms in it, and six puppies in my trailer before breakfast. It's, all that bullshit. And it's just, most people aren't like that. And I honestly, I don't think you can sustain. Well, some people can. I mean, of course there are plenty of examples of monsters, as we know. And it does. They are the exception, and it's still jaw dropping when you hear about some of the behavior, and you just go, what the how does that happen?
Yeah.
How do you come into work? How do you see those people the next day,
Yeah.
and look them in the eye, or do this job with them again tomorrow? How do you turn up tomorrow after behaving like that? Are you not like, But if you make a list of if we all were to make a list of our own worst behavior and have it read back to us in stark black and white, then it wouldn't
Yeah.
it wouldn't feel very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, mine wouldn't.
So you graduate RADA. What
Yeah.
happens next?
What happened next? I I had an agent, which
Mhm,
was amazing.
mhm,
I was very lucky in that in my final year I'd had a couple of decent parts. So there was opportunity for agents to see me performing in decent parts. And I didn't know anything about any of the agents, so I just met a few of them and didn't really do any homework. And just went with the one who seemed nicest. um, and just started chivying away at it. And I mean, it has to be said that I, I'm appallingly unproactive about my career. I always have been.
mhm.
On the one hand, there has been this obsessive monomania, but get in line,
Yeah.
literally. I mean, if you're not stage struck, then you got no business being in the business.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I did just sort of put myself on the roulette table and just see which number I got flung around to.
Mhm.
And my agent would call with auditions, and I'd go to auditions and meetings, and uh, one or two of them would come through.
Mhm.
Um, my there were a couple of sort of very journeyman like bits of telly, one episode of this, a few scenes on that kind of thing, which was whatever. And then my first theatre job was in a Terence Rattigan play. It was with the Oxford Stage Company, which eventually became Headlong. It was still being run by Dominic Dromgoole at the time.
Mhm.
And it was a Terence Rattigan play called After the Dance, and which later was done at the National by Thea Sharrock with Benedict Cumberbatch and stuff. But our production, we did a tour. So we were at places like Salisbury and Oxford and Guildford and went around, and it's a beautiful play. I had a marvelous time on it. And Dom ended up uh, in the I had no idea this would happen, but in the years ahead became, I suppose, something of a mentor.
Mhm.
It was years later, after the History Boys.
Oh, we'll talk about it. I have it
Yeah.
written down. So
Say again.
I wrote it down. I do research on everybody, so I have like a big list of
Oh, right. Well, yeah. I mean, it was so.
He was a artistic director of the Globe, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So, so
Sorry, I find it interesting because you have on your CV Shakespeare's Globe and now it's the Globe Theater. So I didn't even realize that there was a name change or if there is one.
oh no, it's still Shakespeare's Globe. I don't know why that's on there. I mean,
It,
it's known colloquially as the Globe,
yeah.
but its full name is Shakespeare's Globe. And yeah, that's still the case. Uh, but Dom um is loyal. He's if you're going to have a mentor, he's a good one to have. And but I hadn't seen him for years, and it was only because Thea Sharrock, who directed that other After the Dance with Benedict Cumberbatch and everything, she'd seen our production because
Mhm,
she knew Dom. So anyway, by the time it came around to there was a season post History Boys at Shakespeare's Globe,
mhm,
and Thea had a production of As You Like It, and Dom was also doing a play, and they were casting around. So, uh, and I was totally unemployed. I didn't have anything else to do,
mhm.
and um, everyone had always talked about what a lovely time it is spending a summer on Bankside doing something at the Globe. So I thought, thank you very much. Yes, lovely. So I did a play with both of them,
I
and
do have a program of As You Like It somewhere in my apartment
oh,
because
you saw
I,
it?
I didn't. So when I was in college and a little after, there's a theater at the school I went to. And when the Globe came to New York with Love's Labor's Lost and Merry Wives of Windsor, they had a
Right.
stop in New York at this theater I worked at, and they had me do the merch. So I became friendly with whomever it
Uh,
was. And I was looking in like their trunk, and they had a program of As You Like It, and they let me keep it. So somewhere in my apartment, I tried to find it last night. I couldn't. I do have a program As You Like It, but I do have a folio of Merry Wives of Windsor that they gifted to me as a thank you for doing merch.
Lovely,
Yeah.
lovely. Well, I mean, that one, uh, in many ways, was a transformative summer. It changed my thinking on an awful lot of things, and it was yet another example of me realizing that I was totally wrong about something that I'd always said, or a position I'd always held, or whatever. And then and it led.
Or
Say again.
about Shakespeare, performing Shakespeare or something else?
About uh about the Globe experiment, because it was still, I mean, I'd opened in 97, but it's still relatively early days. This was well, it had been open for 10 years.
Yeah.
But there was uh out of ignorance, I'd sort of probably fallen behind a sort of a pervasive attitude at the time that it was a curious beast, and a bit of a kind of uh, touristic and Mickey Mouse sort of enterprise, a bit sort of, Willy Wood, um, um, and did it really constitute good theatre, or proper
So
theatre, and
as
all
we in New York would call it, a tourist trap.
yeah, all that
I
kind of stuff,
swear. Yeah.
and of course that was, coming from a place of, for a start, never having tried it,
Yeah.
and not really having been to see anything there. But then it started to change when I saw Mark Rylance play Hamlet,
Wow.
and I had very a lot of conflicting and contradictory responses to it. But he did basically single-handedly turn upside down everything that I thought I knew about performing Shakespeare, and it was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Um, and and then after that, I'd had a couple of friends say that they just had such a wild, wonderful, joyous time performing there. So when it came around, and like I said, I didn't have anything else going anyway, I went, well, sure. And as it happens, I happened to read a book at the time, which I was really stuck playing. I had no ambitions to play Oliver in As You Like It. I didn't really know the play. I'd only seen it once as a teenager, and I didn't really like it. So I was really stuck playing Oliver, and I felt awkward and embarrassed doing it. And I happened to discover a book which wasn't about Shakespeare specifically, but it was about um uh symbolic and allegorical and poetic frameworks behind a lot of poetry, including by the likes of a lot of people, including Shakespeare. And it sort of rescued me and saved me, and again really broadened my horizons in terms of the way I now read Shakespeare, and the way I respond to the plays. And doing As You Like It led directly to playing Prince Hal the following year, which led directly, of course, to playing Henry V a
Yeah.
couple of years later. Um, and so, and looking back, all of that came from my first winter out of drama school, doing that little tour of After the Dance with Dom. And Dom was again one of those, uh, when you're young and stupid and you don't know any better, and you're still in the process of being formed, the
Mm.
best you can hope for really is that you can have more experienced people around you who will knock the corners off you,
Mhm.
but not in a vicious or brutal way. They'll do what needs to be done, but ultimately in a benign way. And I definitely count Dom as among one of those influences, because I was full of shit as
Mm.
a 22-year-old recent graduate, and hiding behind the big I am. And he knew how, he wasn't phased by it at all, and he knew how to just sort of knock it off without having to completely destroy me in the process. So and 10 years later, it led to one of my childhood dreams coming true, you know,
Which was what? I'm sorry.
which was Henry V.
Henry V. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, and so, but yeah, I'd had this. I'd grown up with Branner and Olivier, and
Mm.
there had always been this daydream
Yeah.
of that role, but it was in an Elizabethan playhouse. It was on the oak boards with the pillars with the groundlings, and um, but but when I was a kid, the Shakespeare's Globe experiment on Bankside didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like I say, it wasn't built till 1997, and it took a few years for me to come around to the idea that it was worth an experiment worth trying in the first place.
Mhm.
So, cut to Olympic year of 2012, it was a really strange thing to turn up to work and be teching in Henry V at an Elizabethan playhouse.
Yeah.
Really, really strange.
Well, how was it
Um,
for you? Because you also did Henry the Fourth, Part One and Two. So you had
mm,
this huge
yeah,
arc with this character.
yeah.
Did you tour Henry the Fifth around as well, or am I just making that up?
We didn't tour. We toured Henry V, yes,
Yeah.
because it was in the London Olympic year of 2012, the Globe did a festival called the Globe to Globe Festival,
Mhm.
where basically they put on the complete works, or they invited one production
Mhm.
from every one of the plays, but each one was from a different country and spoken in a different language.
Mhm.
So you had like a Macedonian Henry VI Part Two and a Japanese Coriolanus, and
Wow.
just you name it. And it was extraordinary. And while that was going on, we were touring with Henry V.
Yeah.
Um, and then we came in at the end, and we were the final one in the Globe to Globe festival, and then we ran for the rest of the summer,
Mhm.
um, doing a sort of a fully fledged
Yeah.
usual drill bankside run.
Because I
Uh,
remember when that was performing at the Globe, if memory serves me correctly, like that production was a very big deal to have there, or at least in
the
my mind it was.
the Henry V.
Yeah. Or am I just
I
making that up in my head because you were
I
in it?
don't. Well, it was a big deal for me. I know that
Yeah.
much, but whether it was a big deal for anybody else, I don't know. It certainly. I mean, it was a very excited
Yeah.
summer in London. It was an extraordinary thing, sort of moment to be. I think everybody felt like it was an extraordinary summer to be a part of in London. And it certainly felt extraordinary to me to be playing that role
Yeah.
um in London while the Olympics were on. I mean, it's sort of uh so I'm probably the last person qualified uh to answer that question as to whether it was a big deal, but I know that it felt like it to me.
And they did
Um
film it for the Globe, so it is forever on
mhm.
video somewhere.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course I hate it. I mean, I always hate live recordings. They're awful experiences because they're just entirely self-conscious, and they're like along with press nights. I don't think you could devise a performance that's less conducive to relaxed concentration and that kind of stop trying to hit me and hit me, all that good Zen stuff. I've never ever had a relaxed press night or done a live recording that I've been happy with. They're just singularly self-conscious affairs, which is, my own hang-ups. But the if there were ever an example of gripping too hard,
Yeah.
um, then Henry V is it. What I wouldn't give to do that again now. I feels like it was pointing in the right direction. I was very, very proud of it.
You don't know.
Um,
Listen, Shakespeare, you can do it in your backyard. Shakespeare is free to put on, you know?
I still know it.
Yeah, why not? You
You
could do a
know,
little bit right now.
yeah.
Was it the goal to end up doing Henry V? Because you started out doing part one and two, and then Henry V with the same character. So
I think
that's
I
the
think
end goal?
I, I tried very hard not to allow myself to go there because it was too much to hope for, I think.
Mhm.
Because Henry IV had been all my birthdays come at once anyway, because I had Roger fucking Allam playing Falstaff, who's a
Yeah.
genius.
Mhm.
And I don't think we are likely to see another Falstaff that can hold a torch to him, frankly, for a generation. And the fact that I got to do that pub scene with him, it was one of those. There's been a small handful of instances in my life that I can point very specifically to and say that, where I can say I should not have been getting paid to do that.
Yeah.
It was the gift of a lifetime. It was just joyous. And because I'd grown up, and part of that joy came from the fact that hardwired into the Falstaff Hal relationship is the mentor apprentice relationship between the actors playing Falstaff and Hal.
Mhm.
And Shakespeare was writing for actors in that context. You know, he's writing for future leading man. He's writing for established character actor.
Mhm.
And they're dueling for the entire 6 hours of these incredible plays. Um, and so because I'd grown up listening to Roger's tone and cadence and just having his voice in my head, it felt like we were on the same page. And it felt like I could play that game.
Mhm.
And again, I was still learning. Looking back, there's plenty that again, I wish I could do it again.
Yeah.
I'd go, I know how to do that bit now. Or I just wouldn't try so hard at that bit.
Yeah.
Um, but that's inevitable, isn't it? I think that's just experience talking.
So, not to keep bringing up the history boys, but how did that come into your life?
Well, that just came about for an coming out of drama school, and I had the agent, and they'd set up these meetings. You know, I was a new kid on the block, one of many, and so you'd set up with not just auditions for plays, but you'd also have sort of a general meeting, an introductory, "Hi, this is my face, this is me. Nice to meet you," with casting directors at
Yeah.
theatres.
Mhm.
One of them was with Toby Whale at the National Theatre.
Mhm.
Um, and um, so I had a general meeting with Toby, and that was lovely and everything. And then they were casting around for this new Alan Bennett play. And I was on the list. So I went in, and but it was a curious one. It was oh well, I did the workshop. That's how it started. The script was being developed in the National Theatre studio. So Alan had come up with this sort of pile of raw material, a whole succession of vignettes and scenes and exchanges and bits of dialogue. And Nick was alongside with, along with him, was sort of crafting it into something that was structured like a play.
Mhm.
And that involved doing various sort of rehearsed readings. So we did one where we had a few days at the studio, and had Ben Whishaw played the part that I played, and
For
Hugh Bond.
Rudge, correct?
I yes, that's right. I read Rudge.
Mhm.
Um, Sam read Posner, and Dom was still Dakin, but we had Hugh Bonneville as Hector, if
Oh,
memory
wow.
serves, and
I
yeah,
will
but it
say Rudge has a line in the play that I still use today, where it's history is just one fucking
one
thing
fucking thing
after
after
another.
another. Yeah,
It's the truest line in a play that exists today because
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how much you sort of dress it up. It is that's pretty much how it goes.
Yeah, I quote
Um,
it not all the time, but it is a quote I use in my life.
yeah,
Yeah.
the one I keep coming back to as well is which sort of where we started this conversation was the transmission of knowledge is in itself an erotic act,
Yeah.
um, which is a a dangerously dicey bit of defense on Hector's point at that point on Hector's part at that point in the play. Um, but I stand by it, not
Mhm.
necessarily as Hector's defense, but just as a concept that
Mhm.
there is something in the exchange of knowledge between someone who has greater experience and learning,
Mhm.
and an apprentice who is eager to learn and is having their eyes opened, and is gaining experience through someone. Um, that is intensely intimate, and you can see why people can get themselves into hot water over it.
Yeah.
Not that they should, but it's that's yeah. So the I did the workshop with History Boys, but then there was a casting process after that, which I had to go through as well.
Mhm.
But it was one of those things, like the piano, for example, was never part of the conversation in the casting process. They didn't had any idea that I could play the piano.
The last time I saw the play on Broadway, I had rush tickets and they were partial view, so the piano blocked like a good percentage.
Oh, right, you were
So
way
it's like
stage
all the way
left.
on the side. Yes, I was the
Yeah.
last time I saw the show, and James Lipton was there, and I just remember his like skin and hair just looked like chocolate and caramel mixed together. It's just like very random, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a curious thing with all that stuff, because again, I'd this thing about sort of gripping too hard or whatever, that I'd grown up watching Alan Bennett in Beyond the Fringe, and along with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore and Jonathan Miller, and um I wished I could have not given a shit on the level of James Corden, who just didn't particularly know and didn't particularly care, because he and was just having a laugh
Yeah.
with whoever was available, including Alan Bennett. But to me, I was absolutely guilty of that which Alan hates, which is treating him like a national treasure. I was far too sort of well behaved on that score. But the piano thing came about because of watching Dudley Moore's contribution to
Mhm.
something that Alan Bennett was a part of, and I thought, it just sort of, it came up in rehearsals that with all these movie endings and stuff, and there were scene transitions and stuff like that, and it felt appropriate. It felt like, what if one of the kids could deliver a flavor of that sort of,
Mhm.
not that I can't hold a torch to Dudley Moore's level of piano playing,
Mhm.
but that something of that flavor is
Yeah.
sort of where that came from for me. But then it was a process of actually
Mhm.
achieving it, and I had to prove that I could actually play the fucking piano.
Yeah.
And there was a horrible
Brief
moment where
Encounter scene was my first introduction to Brief Encounter. So when I eventually watched it and saw it on stage, I was like, oh, that's the moment. Especially when you're like, thank you for coming back to me.
yeah, it's
Like,
right at the end. It's literally the last thing that happens in the movie. But my God, it's beautiful. What an amazing movie. But
yeah. Well,
it's
I saw the stage production that originated in London and they brought over to New York, and it's still to this day one of like the most incredible pieces of theater I've ever seen.
with Naomi, of course, who was Rosalind at the Globe. Going back to that same
Oh,
production, yeah,
oh,
she was,
amazing.
who was marvelous, beautiful, amazing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that was that. It it, it looking back, it just seems like sort of blind luck. A lot of it,
Mhm.
you're sort of a leaf in the wind, and you get carried. You happen to be in the right place at the right time to catch that particular gust. And of course, you've got to do your job. You've got to turn up and be worth employing again.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah.
Um, there, there are too many. I was thinking about this recently. If I could change one thing going back, there are too many times I've got to the end of a job and just not because anything particularly bad has happened,
Mhm.
but I've just known that director won't be employing me again. Or or that particular combination of people is not likely to happen again, just because it wasn't fruitful, and in a particular way. And it would be because it takes a long time not to take that personally,
Mhm.
and just separate being easy to work with and a safe pair of hands from uh, the frustrations if something isn't particularly working.
Yeah.
Um, having to turn up and swallow that pill every day, going into the theater and going, oh God, you just feel like such a twat, and just it's hard not to carry that personally. And again, that's another thing that takes experience. So, uh, but not the History Boys is one of those. It wasn't. But it's that's definitely something that's on the experience
Because you have
blackboard.
worked with a couple of the same actors in a couple of years, because you reunited with Sam Barnett in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead.
Yeah. But Sam's golden. He's made of sunshine. It's impossible not to fall head over heels in love with Sam Bonnet. So just don't tell him I said that one. But
Not a problem.
uh, yeah, but
Unless he
that was a good
listens to the
example. We had a very
podcast, then shit.
say again.
I said unless he listens to the podcast, then
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. No, he's what an asshole. But he that was a good example. I think Sam would agree that we had quite a frustrating experience on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. But it was also weirdly contradictory, because then there'd be, over the course of the run, we didn't know what was going to happen. It was either gold dust and just absolutely amazing, or it died on its ass for 2.5 hours, and we just didn't know which way it was going to go. There was no in between. It was really strange, really strange. And when it,
Tom Stoppard, so
yeah, when it worked, it really, really worked, and when
yeah.
it didn't, it was horrible. Um, uh, and that was really kind of strange, but you wouldn't trade it.
Yeah. So you were in a Tom Cruise movie, Valkyrie. How did that come into your life? Or did you
Again,
want to like bring?
you just sort of think, oh my, yeah, how did that come about?
Yeah. Sorry, there's a siren.
No, that's right. I was doing a the audition was set up by my agent at the time, but I maintain that Valkyrie is weird, because you really can sort of lift it out of my life, out of my career in its entirety, and
Mhm,
put it over here, and it doesn't sort of really affect anything else.
mhm. Well, I just
Um,
bring that because it like Tom Cruise was in it, so
yeah, but it is this sort of reference point,
yeah.
but unlike everything else, has sort of got this sort of interlinked, intermingled kind of, those people I work with on that, which led on to this, that, and the other thing. But the Valkyrie thing sort of stands on its own. I've never had another experience quite like it, and it's never really led on to anything uh, career wise, specifically.
Yeah.
So, um, but I maintain that I only got the job, excuse me, because um of of the lead up to the audition and the mindset that I was in going into the audition. Because if it had been sort of normal times, probably I'd certainly just blown the meeting and not got the part. Um, I'd booked my wife and I on a week's bushcraft survival course, um, which was I mean, don't ask me why. There was a guy on British TV called Ray Mears, who was amazing. He's like the sort of the David Attenborough of bushcraft.
Mhm.
And he ran a series of courses, and we went and did one for a week. And so we were there sitting, making string out of willow bark and lighting fire, and we hadn't seen a mirror or shaved in a week, and sleeping in a tent and hanging out with deer, and panassing trout over a fire, and it was just absolutely lovely. But and it was quite a profound experience. Um, but we got back and hadn't touched my phone for a week. Got back in the car at the end, and my phone exploded with messages, and they're all from my agent. So I called my agent. She basically went, "Where the fuck are you?" I said, "I'm in Kent." And so she said, "Right, you have to get to the Covent Garden Hotel by 2 o'clock. You've got a meeting with Bryan Singer and Chris McQuarrie for the new Tom Cruise film." I was like, okay. So, having gone from this sort of dappled sunlight and being surrounded by Disney animals to just running headlong through the rain in Covent Garden and sort of bursting into this sort of luxury hotel in the center of London I was still, I mean, I had, I was getting bits of mud. I think I had bits of blood on me still at the time, and just like I was like a sort of wild man from a cave in the woods.
Mhm.
Um, and but because I was the last thing on earth I was thinking about was an acting career. Um, I sort of carried this sort of um uh I don't know what you'd call that,
Mhm.
but it certainly wasn't caring too much or gripping too hard.
Yeah.
Um, and I had something else to talk about aside from acting and how much I wanted the part.
Yeah.
Because of course I came in and it was an immediate talking point of what the hell, where where have you come from? And so and I was all
Yeah.
yeah sort of G'd up about something. Um, so then there was the sort of this slightly madness of okay, I'm going to Berlin for 4.5 months and filming with Tom Cruise. That
Yeah.
was weird.
Yeah.
Um, and brilliant.
So getting back really quick, I don't mean to like keep going back to the History Boys, but I wanted to ask you about the movie. How do you feel about the changes that were made from the play to the film,
Uh
if you can remember?
well, it's been a long time since I've seen it. But uh I I remember that we did film all of the Scripps narration bits, the
Mhm.
bits that I would do to the audience, and they weren't used. And at the at the time, I kind of again I was sort of like, oh, that's sort of the main meat and potatoes of my part. I was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
all gone. But looking back, I would have made exactly the same decision. It's a very different beast. It was strange filming it because we were really because of course we had the part of the rhythm was the audience and we didn't have them uh and battling the over familiarity with some of the new material in the scripts. But it was just ultimately it was just fun. It was hilarious. We've shot it incredibly quickly. We did the whole film in 30 days, I think,
Mhm.
possibly even less. Um and the Ashes series were on. The cricket was amazing, and it was just a very we were young, and it was a beautiful summer, and we just had a wonderful time. We were sort of we didn't know any better. We just thought it's always going to be like this.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but it was weird because then of course we filmed it, and then went back to doing the play and we went into that whole bit of doing it for 6 months on Broadway. So the seeing the film for the first time
Mhm.
was was it, I think the premiere was the first time we saw it. Maybe
Mhm.
I'm remembering that wrong, but I do remember that we did the last performance on in New York at the Broadhurst, and we
Mhm.
all had our luggage with us at the theater because we did the curtain call, got changed in the dressing rooms, came down to the stage door, and got into a coach that took us to JFK, flew to London, got off at Heathrow, and went to the Dorchester, got changed into our tuxedos and went to Leicester Square for the movie premiere. We literally hot-footed it straight from the final performance to the London premiere. Um, and red carpeted and met Prince Charles and then sort of sat down in the dark and we were like because we're all massively
Yeah.
jet lagged. But it was also that thing of hearing ourselves say these lines in a previous iteration where the show had, despite our best efforts, had continued to
Yeah.
develop,
Mhm.
and it was like, yeah, we don't do it like that anymore. We're several versions down the line now, but uh, yeah, it's strange. I think inevitably I'll always remember the play more fondly than the film, only because uh but I would have if the film had been the original version, like the original
Yeah.
the way that the story had been birthed in the first place, then that would have been the sort of foundation stone. But I think because we did it in theatre,
Mhm.
that'll always have the sort of pride of place for me. But it was great because we had Penelope Wilton and Adrian Scarborough and all the
Yeah.
other faces that came to play.
Mhm.
And Yeah, at least if nothing else, it's a sort of it's a record, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's I don't know. I again, I really don't feel qualified
Mhm.
to say whether it's sort of it's a success or not. It feels like it succeeds on its own terms. But it's just very different.
Mhm.
Remember Nick saying it's is a great movie. And Alan Bennett's script is not naturalistic.
Mhm.
It's schoolboys in Sheffield in the 80s didn't actually talk like that. But when you're in a theatre, you have license.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and so I'm still not sure whether we'd we were sort of granted enough of that license to speak like that in a naturalistic medium like film. Um, but others will feel strongly about that one way or the other. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, for those listening, if you want to see their like video diaries of like the making of the film and the different productions, I think they're like all up on YouTube somewhere.
See our younger faces.
Yeah, James Corden and Dominic Cooper, I think, like filmed a lot of your travels, and they
Yeah, I remember all of that. Yeah.
the extras and the photo shoots and all that stuff. So, what was I going to ask? Now I'm brain farting. I can't remember because I can have an entire podcast about the History Boys, but I don't want to keep asking you about it. So you were actually one of my, so aside from the History Boys and Brief Encounter and all that stuff, one of my other favorite plays is Proof, and you actually
Oh,
got to perform that. So what was that like?
Proof's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'd because that's one that's in the tradition of single syllable play titles that have won a Pulitzer Prize.
yeah.
Along with there's Doubt, isn't there, as well, and I thought
Yeah, they're great too.
various
I
others.
could see you. I just like had an epiphany. I could see you doing Doubt. That's
I'd love to do Doubt. I saw an excellent production of Doubt only recently at Chichester,
yeah.
which Leah Williams directed. And I was kind of it was great because I'd seen it before. I'd seen it once before, and it wasn't particularly good. So it was sort of, I was a bit
Did you
kind of
see the
underwhelmed.
movie as well?
I saw the movie, and uh, I love everybody involved in the movie.
Mhm.
Um, but I felt slightly overwhelmed by the greatness of the sort of self-conscious greatness of the movie.
Mhm.
Just because of the sort of titanicness of having all of these greats
Yeah.
doing this great script. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but also there's something about inevitably you saw the kids and you saw the interaction with
Yeah.
the priest. The whole point of the play is that
You don't
you
know.
can't see them.
Yeah.
So you're
I
you're you're projecting onto the performance, and that's the whole nature of it. Is it's not defined, and inevitably the film ended up defining
Mhm.
stuff in concrete, sort of more concrete terms, which I don't really see a way around that unless you did a much more abstract approach to the film. But I don't think.
I mean, I think it's interesting because the playwright wrote and directed the movie. And
Hmm.
for me, like with the play, you don't know if he did it, but I feel like in the movie, you do have the answer.
Yes, exactly. I agree. It felt like it answered it in a way that I didn't want it to. So it was only recently when I saw the play again that I felt like I sort of finally properly got on board with
Mhm.
with it as a venture. And what going back to what we sort of started this conversation
Mhm.
around sort of the simplicity of just the actor in the empty space talking and being truthful, and how you don't need anything to bolster that. When
Mhm.
it works, it works. And this was a really good example of that. It's just of a director who's also an actor, and an extremely good one, with a very, very good cast, just being laser focused on the work, and not trying to dress it up in anything more than was needed, and just looking at each other and telling the truth.
Mhm.
Just say the lines and mean them. And that simple, clean work was extremely powerful, as powerful as anything else I've seen in the theatre.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it was a really good example of why theatre will hopefully persist.
Yeah.
Whatever changes may be ahead, because you really don't need anything
Mhm.
aside from decent script and decent actors.
I completely
Um,
agree with you.
uh, but yeah, proof.
Another play where there is a question of whether or not somebody did something, not in
Yeah,
a way, but
it's
whether or not you wrote the proof.
yeah, it's one of the it's extremely actable stuff. It's a very it's a very easy script to say, which is telling, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I haven't thought about it for a little while actually. It'd be interesting to revisit it. Another one where I had seen the film, and I think the film works pretty well. Although I would have liked to have seen um Mary Louise Parker do it, because she did it originally, didn't she?
She did. Well, Gwyneth
Um,
Paltrow did play it on stage, I think, in the UK at some point. But yeah, Mary Louise
yes, that's right. She
Parker.
did it at the Donmar, I think,
Mhm.
or something like that. But yeah, I know I had Minnie Gale and Matthew Marsh, McConiff, and it was yeah, it was a good one. I think what do I think? I think I'd quite like to get. It's one of those ones where I'd quite like to get that combination of people back together again and do something like it. You know, it felt like there was something going on. It'd be good to do something. Uh, Proof version 2.0. Well, you know, to not necessarily. I don't mean necessarily a literal update of the same play, but to sort of, it felt like um uh there were possibilities left unexplored, and we could keep going and do more. Proof was
You
a
can
sort of
do a
starting
radio
point.
play of it, and you have
Yeah, yeah.
you're very
Um,
big with the Audible as of late, so I can definitely see.
bit busy. Well, you can see me sitting here in my reconditioned toilet. Um, in my audio booth. Um, yeah, lots of audiobooks these days,
Yeah.
which is great. I'm loving it. In fact, we've got various others coming up as well in the near shortly. So it's they've been a real godsend over lockdown. I know that much.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, you've done a lot of them. You've done historical, you've done fiction. I'm curious to know because on your website, as you saw with my notepad, I've done a lot of research. You even have how long each like audio is, and you have some that are over 10 hours. How long does it take you to record something like
Which is
that?
a drop in the well. I've just been listening to Alex Jennings reading Nicholas Nickleby, which was 34 hours. I listened to Miriam Margolyes doing Bleak House. That was 42 hours.
Wow. Well,
Um,
I've had some long podcast recordings, and people are like, I need to do it not in one sitting. Nothing to that extent,
yeah.
but
It's like the entire Greek cycle or something. No, it's it depends on the book, but I mean sort of 2.5 days, really, sort of
yeah.
3 days in the studio, but some obviously a lot less than that. And uh I've done a couple of very long non-fiction ones, which I was hoping were going to be much more interesting than they actually were, which took longer to record.
Yeah.
Um
How is it when you're recording something that has multiple people also involved?
well, again, it's just about doing the work. I think I'm really happy saying this, that one of my favorite gigs I've ever had in my life was an audiobook, and it was doing Far From the Madding Crowd. And there's another one which was recently, which was non-fiction, but it was called Super Infinite by Catherine Rundle, about John Donne.
Mhm.
Um, both of which totally different. The first one's a novel and has a huge cast of characters, and that was just about literally casting it. You just had to kind of basically made a list of how many different voices can I do,
Mhm.
and sort of write it. And it's normally quite clunky. It's
Yeah.
just about trying to sort of resonate in a different place. You know, you can place a voice in your throat or in your nose or in your chest, or
Yeah.
just or um, give a character a very very tight mouth smile or something like that, or shaky old man kind of thing. Just pick a kind of very, very clear image, and just list them and then kind of cast them,
Yeah.
just so you know exactly what sound you're doing when a character comes up. And then you got Hardy's Prose, which is just to die for. And that was probably that was probably longer actually. That one probably must have been about 4 days to record that one. Um, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it because I feel like a lot of the time you don't have uh to be honest, you don't have that much prep time necessarily.
Mhm.
Sometimes you are slightly recording them on the fly, and it's frustrating. You get frustrated with yourself because you think, oh, God, I haven't had time, or I just simply haven't done enough prep on this.
Mhm.
Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, uh, to record that much material in a short space of time, and it is a definite kind of skill set that you need to develop. And some people just really don't like it. A friend of mine was uh, said he started to try to record something for a birthday of his godson or his nephew or something. He said I did about 20 minutes. I started to hallucinate. Um, so because there is something about the tension of being,
Mhm.
around suddenly the microphone, and you can hear yourself when you're trying not to make any noise, and you're conscious of the sound of your breathing, and
Mhm.
everything just sort of goes wrong. Uh, but for me, it's about 3:30 in the afternoon
Yeah.
when it just starts to swim in front of my eyes, and because I can maintain the sound of somebody formulating sentences in English,
Mhm.
because I can just keep the music of
Yeah.
sight reading prose going, but I am not listening to a blind word I'm saying. And that's quite frightening. You sort of go, oh, hang on a minute, I haven't been thinking any of these thoughts, and I don't know how long that's been going on for. Um, it's definitely a kind of a practice, and it's a particular type of concentration, and it's one that I really enjoy, especially with when the material is good. That John Donne book, Catherine Rundle is an absolutely blistering writer, and those two books are probably amongst the most enjoyable gigs I've ever had.
You just also had one where you were considered as a best actor for like a Rogers and Hammerstein and Hart one, where you also sang on
Oh, that
it.
was lovely. That was yeah. Again, that was over
I
lockdown.
love a Rogers and Hammerstein musical, so I mean I know a lot of them are controversial, but now, but I listened to a little bit of it yesterday and I just enjoyed it so much so that I actually saved like the full episode on
Oh,
my
it's lovely.
computer.
It's a lovely bit of writing by Sarah Woolley, and uh, it's just a really lovely scene where because apparently Richard Rodgers did um write extremely quickly.
Yeah,
A lot of his songs, he wrote the melody and would come out with uh this is what you get into in the drama of that play, but his relationship with Lorenz Hart, that he necessarily had to write very quickly while he was fielding Hart's alcoholism.
mhm,
Um, and it was driving him nuts how long Oscar Hammerstein was taking to write the lyrics. Um, and he would write incredibly quickly, and you see there's so Sarah had license to write this scene where you kind of hear him in real time writing "Oh, what a beautiful morning."
yeah,
And it's just lovely. It's just lovely, just sort of hearing that, because everybody knows it. It's so familiar, and it is one of those. There's a line in Brideshead Revisited where Charles Ryder writes about being in a state of flow when he's painting, and he's saying it's sort of almost like he's not painting stuff onto the canvas. It's like he's revealing a painting that was already there. And it's sort of a similar feeling with that song. You kind of go, we all know this tune and this song, and it is simple, but still somebody needs to actually set it down at some point, and you just hear this song emerge.
yeah,
And you go, there it is, and it just sort of, yeah, makes you beam. I think it's
yeah.
beautiful stuff.
I also just love how the during that little clip that you have on your website where you hear him write the song, you come in, you're like, oh, I wrote it, and then it kind of goes into the song, and then you hear the audience reaction from the song. That was just,
Yes.
I thought
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was so beautiful.
Well, I mean, of course, that we recorded that at a time when I didn't know if I was ever going to set foot in a professional theatre ever again.
Yeah.
There were bleak days, and that was as close as we got to actually being able to be, to remember what it was like to be sitting at the back of an auditorium,
Yeah.
crapping yourselves over a first night. And just so it was a gift. I remember that one very fondly. Yeah.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, you were very active on social media. You're very active on Twitter, but I'm talking about like Instagram, and you have a YouTube channel.
Oh God.
They're great. They're great. And that
I
just
kind of
kind of like went away.
I did go away. Yeah. I well, like everyone else, I didn't know what the hell am I going to do with my time. And I did want a way of keeping busy, but I also so I tried it for a bit, and I
Mhm.
had a list of things to I thought, well, I can do this, that, and the other thing. But um I, but why did I let it go? I let it go for a combination of reasons. One was I wasn't comfortable with the model of just basically doing work for free, because until you have to do that for a long time before you can monetize it.
Yeah.
And also, uh, I wasn't happy with like on a production level. I wanted them to look and sound good,
Yeah.
and I don't know the first fucking thing about lighting and sound, and
Mhm.
there's a very very steep learning curve. So suddenly you're learning about 3-point lighting and
Mhm.
what the hell is compression and
But you
and
managed to
edit.
like put a video with Sam in it very well. So
Yeah, and do all that stuff on iMovie, and so that's and there was part of me that was loving and enjoying all that, and I did enjoy it, and some of them have come out really well, and I'm happy with that. But um, uh, in order for it to in order to play the YouTube game effectively, you have to keep putting out content regularly, a little and often, and that is not my that's not my MO.
yeah.
And I wasn't comfortable or happy with just putting out 10 minutes worth of whatever.
Yeah.
And I wasn't set up to come up with 10 minutes worth of stuff that I was happy with
Mhm.
um every 2 weeks, at the same time as uh living at home during lockdown,
Yeah.
homeschooling and everything else that was going on. So so yeah, I let it go, and there's a handful of bits and bobs on there, but it so it was fun while it lasted. But
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it for ages. I kind of keep forgetting that they're actually on there.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed some of the videos that were posted up there. I think like your first one you posted, I think like your first Instagram post was like a piano, you at the piano going through like all of Shakespeare's works.
Oh, great song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's it's like the globe. So
Yeah, it's lovely. And but again, it's sort of, the trick with all of that stuff is making it trying to make it look easy.
mhm.
And of course, it's anything but. It
Yeah.
was really hard, that song, and it took trying to get it out. So I've got to get this out by Thursday. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and in order to get anything done, that's what Leonard Bernstein said. You need to, in order to come up with any kind of artistic endeavor, you need to have a decent idea and not quite enough time, and that's sort of fair enough.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not the same as trying to do it under lockdown
Yeah.
at home. That was yeah. It was I would have liked to have done more, but then there also came a kind of thing where I kind of went, I don't really know. I don't really, I didn't know what to do next. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to just start trotting out songs, and I didn't want to just, try. I do have a long running, long standing idea tied with Shakespeare that I would love to do, but and I've tried to start it many times, but it's a vast amount of work that I just haven't been able to find my way into doing. It's essentially it's writing a book, and I don't I don't know how to do that kind of research. I don't know how to apply myself to that kind of work, and I really wish I did, and maybe at some point I'll learn how. Um, uh, but I haven't got to it yet. But I can imagine, but that would be a whole different channel. But that would essentially be, what would that be? It'd be kind of like a more along the lines of a sort of Skillshare, I suppose, or a lecture series, or I'm not quite sure what you'd call that.
I think it would depend on, I mean, not to sound like how I was, it's very vague what you're saying. So I think it would depend on what you wanted to do, and then you would figure it out from there.
Yeah, that's the whole shooting match, isn't it? So I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe I'll figure that one out eventually, but who knows?
Yeah. So it's time to talk about Potter. How did it come into your life?
How did Harry Potter come into my life? Well, I was doing something very different. I was doing Guys and Dolls
Yeah,
in
I
London.
I wanted to ask you about Assassins as well and Guys and Dolls, and I just jumped the gun with Harry Potter. So let's go back in time. Let's talk about Assassins. So that's a great musical.
It
And
is, yeah, one
yeah,
of the greats.
I just saw a production of it, I think last year. They did at a theater in New York, Classic Stage Company. And I thought it was interesting because they had like the actors come out in masks and then they would take them off and then they would put them back on. I don't think that was necessary because
You mean like COVID masks?
yeah, like they were wearing like masks
Right.
because of COVID, which I don't really think was necessary to anything that the story was telling. But it was a really great production. I know that like the Chocolate Factory is very like they're known for their really cool productions of whatever they put on.
Yeah, well, we had, Jamie Lloyd just
Yeah.
handled it absolutely brilliant. And of course, we had Neil Austin doing the lights,
Yeah.
who did Cursed Child, and he's a genius as well. So um, it was an incredible team. And Harry Morrison, who was in Assassins as well. I was doing Guys and Dolls with him at the time, and when we were both casting it, and we had we had a moment where we looked at each other and went, "I'm not. This will be interesting to see how this one plays out, because Assassins is by its nature, it's an ensemble piece for soloists,
Yeah.
and quite quickly if you have the wrong combination of people. But as it happens, we had an extraordinary combination of people who just smashed it, and we're all team players. And Jamie handled it brilliantly because he had us all on all the time,
Mhm.
which meant that we were all um, well, we sort of all were whoever was helming that particular scene. Everyone was sort of empathizing with that plot line at the time,
Mhm.
and that really worked in the intensity of the space. It was played in the traverse, um, and there was no interval or anything like that. You were sort of locked in this space and kind of sort of trapped in there into this sort of little crucible. Um, and you had the likes of like Andy Nyman just absolutely smashing it out, and Aaron Tveit being brilliant. Um, and yeah, but it was one of those ones of kind of, I played the guitar and the banjo and the harmonica in it, and that wasn't something that I particularly had under my belt before we started.
Yeah.
So that was, and you don't get that much rehearsal at at the Chocolate Factory. We only had about 4 weeks, and I was really up against it, getting all that stuff. And I always felt like I was sort of slightly um, behind the curve, running to catch up on that. But when it worked really well. But I don't know if you have any idea how hard it is to keep a banjo in tune.
I
Oh my
wouldn't know,
God.
but oh goodness.
It's so hard. And also, I was preset at the beginning of the show. So I was sitting in this little dodgem car, playing the banjo before it started. But then by the time the show actually started, I feel like I'd need to retune. But trying to do that quiet, banjos are incredibly loud, it turns out. Um, yeah, trying to do that was a sort of a running battle. So it'd be occasional times when I'd start playing, and then the orchestra would start, and I'd go, oh, I'd just stop playing. I'm just going to sing this one because it's clashing too much. But um, it worked really, really well. And I wish that, I wish it had it felt like it deserved a longer life.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have seen it go on, but it's one of those ones where it sort of, perhaps it, it had its audience, it found its audience, and those who saw it loved it.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm not sure how it would have done if we'd gone into a smaller West End theatre or something for a long time. It wouldn't
Yeah.
have been much fun trying to eke it out,
Mhm.
um, and for it not to be quite the same.
Yeah,
Um,
there are some shows I feel like work better in smaller theaters than others. One of my favorite musicals is Once, and when it first
yeah.
started in New York, it was in a very small theater off Broadway, and then they brought it to Broadway. So it was the big question of how is it going to work in this bigger theater? And luckily
Mm.
it did. Uh, but yeah, that's always the question of sizing wise, bringing a show into a bigger theater and how that would work. So Guys and Dolls, how did that come about?
Um, well, I'd played it once before at college. That was one of the parts that I'd got to do in my final year, and then it came about again. Well, Rob Ashford did it with Ewan McGregor.
Mhm.
Um, at at the time. Well, Michael Grandage did it with Rob Ashford, and I remember at the time trying to buttonhole them and say, uh, because I think it was History Boys days, and trying to get my foot in the door for. But I mean, I was nobody at that point, and uh, also I was 24. So there was just never, ever going to happen. But it came around again. Chichester were doing it, and I managed to get myself an audition, and that just sort of played out fairly conventionally on that score, and then it had another life in London. So it's that sort of bookended Assassins. I did Guys and Dolls into Assassins, and then went straight back into Guys and Dolls again, and um, we were doing the dress rehearsal for, well, sorry, no, hang on, backtrack, sorry. We did a couple of weeks out of town, and I was up in Manchester, I think, or Birmingham, and I got a call basically saying, a hypothetical call, in principle, would you be interested in meeting for Harry Potter in the West End? Uh, and I hadn't read the books, and I didn't know that they finished 19 years later, so I was going, which part? um, Getting a bit long in the tooth for a school uniform now, so I didn't really know who they were thinking about.
Mhm.
And honestly, my first response to the idea of a Harry Potter show in the West End was that it sounded awful, sounded a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Um, Probably for all the same reasons that J.K. Rowling herself had turned down pitch after pitch after pitch for years. And then I saw who the creative team were, and you had Sonia and Colin, and you had John and Steve and Neil doing the lights, and on and on and on and on it went, and Jack doing the script, of course. And that's when I went, oh, fuck, that's they're they're
First,
cl-
it's
they're
fine.
they're clearly trying to make this one actually really good.
Yeah.
So uh, Stephen Hoggett had seen Assassins.
Mm.
Quite how in his head he made the leap from Lee Harvey Oswald and sort of Woody Guthrie style balladeer to Harry Potter, I don't know, but there was something going on in that show which made him feel that I should be on the list. I think the list was necessarily relatively short, owing
Yeah.
to the nature of the secrecy surrounding the production. They couldn't um, cast the net too wide, so I think they sort of knew who they wanted to meet for it um, before they got going. And anyway, I came down from wherever I was, Manchester, I think, and sat in Sonia's office with the early draft of the play and read it in one sitting. And it got to the crisis point at the end of the second half where, uh, spoiler alerts, but where Harry has to watch what he has to watch, and he has to let it happen without getting involved. And I was like, well, fuck, that's really dark. And then I saw how they were. It was clear from the stage directions how they were planning on staging it, that they weren't planning on showing the action on stage. They were just planning on staging Harry's reaction to what was happening and having him watching it at the back of the auditorium, which was just a moment of that was theater. It was pure theater. There was no production values to that. That was just out and out storytelling. And that was the sort of the particular detail that made me go, oh fuck, now I really want to do this. Which was honestly the last thing I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, I met for it. It went on tape and then got sent up to Edinburgh, and then I was doing the dress rehearsal for Guys and Dolls opening at the Savoy
Mm-hmm.
in December 15. And in the interval, I got a phone call saying that the offer had come through. I was like, it was absolutely bewildering and bizarre. And so I sort of did the second half of Guys and Dolls in a bit of a daze, and then sort of went from there. It was very, very weird, very weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great transition into Harry Potter.
Yeah, I know. It's high fiddly D. It was all that kind of thing of you couldn't have been playing a more different part, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I wasn't expecting, genuinely, it's difficult to. I don't have to do this anymore. You don't have to, I'm not. Sometimes you feel like you have to say the right thing, but there's sort of no need for that anymore. But so I can say, in all honesty, what I wasn't expecting was for it to be, as Lynn Gardner was saying, it was one of the most honestly collaborative experience. I was expecting it to be, inevitably, I was braced for it to be quite a big commercial machine.
Mm-hmm.
And it was big, and there were a lot of moving parts to it. But because John Tiffany and Stephen Hoggett and all the actors involved and Jack and everyone was cut from the same cloth, basically. We all came from the same tradition, and there was no element of, like I say, it wasn't so and so in or so and so as, and it was bigger than all of us, and because there was a lot of attention on it, everybody wanted it to be as good as it possibly could be. Nobody wanted to be caught. For a start, nobody wanted to caught out not pulling their weight, and secondly, nobody wanted to be caught out being the arsehole.
Yeah.
So everyone brought their A game, and everybody brought their best behavior, and everyone really just threw themselves into it, and it took over our lives for 3 years.
Yeah.
And like I say, it wasn't a straight line. It had peaks and troughs and everything, but the year in London just flew by. It went in a snap, and it had this extraordinary thing of this audience that was so hungry to hear the story, and it really did sort of smack of that sort of pilgrimage thing of this being a bit of a ritual, and this being a very significant event for all the people who turned up to see it. There was only one place on earth where you could come and see this story at the time.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who wanted to go through that process. And so they were in their seats at 1:15. I didn't hear one phone.
Yeah.
For a year in London. I mean, that's wild.
And then you come to New York, and then it constantly rings.
Well, New York was bouncier on all sorts of levels, because New York is its own beast, and that's great. It's not that was just different.
Yeah.
But there was a fertility and a sort of richness to the whole process of getting the production up and running and then performing it to an audience that I was not expecting and could not be more delighted to remember. It's incredibly hard, and we were sort of threadbare and knackered by the end of the year. Certainly by the end of the 3 years, I was tired, man.
Well, for those who have seen it, it's a beast of a show, and especially playing you
It
know,
is
the
big, yeah.
whole pretty much. And I know
And
that
it's weekends as well. You got 2 shows Saturday, 2 shows Sunday. It's not
yeah,
great for families.
yeah,
Um, so it takes its toll
yeah.
over a long time. But yeah, it was, yeah, brilliant, amazing. I wouldn't, wouldn't trade it for anything.
Was there ever talk when the show was first coming out that it would come to New York, or was that midway through the run? And if so, when did they start talking or bringing up the idea of bringing the
I
cast
think,
to New York?
um, I think, well, Sonia and Colin were always pretty candid about, their ambitions. They weren't. This wasn't going to be a short run at the Bush,
Yeah,
and thank you very much. There's the plan was always world domination, I think. And so honestly, I can't remember at what point an actual concrete conversation about New York um, started. It was sort of, it was always, I think, assumed to be a possibility, kind of from the get go. Um, but we none of it was confirmed until after we'd finished the run in London. There was a golden kind of 6 months between finishing in London and actually traveling to New York to
mhm,
start, where this just never happens. This never happens. Where we'd been earning decent money. We knew what the next job was going to be, but
mhm.
we had this little semi-sabbatical, and life was great. It was it was just we like it's remembered that midpoint was just sort of
Yeah,
remembered as this sort of incredible moment where you just have we were constantly we wake up in the morning and go, it'll never be like this. It'll never be like this again. It was just sort of amazing. Um and to get on with everybody and to just, you knew that if you hit difficult parts and everything that difficult patches or the challenges along the way that it wasn't all easy. That people just took it in turns to prop each other up, and it was what it should have been, you
yeah,
know. And we're all kind of so cynical about stuff now that it's to have an experience like that, and you kind of go, oh yeah, no, it is, no, it is there, it
yeah.
actually is there. Um, yeah.
Have you wanted to come back to New York? Because it was been like what, 10 years at that point, or almost, or a little over since you were back doing a show in New York.
It was very exciting to go back to New York. It was very different because on History Boys, I was, like I said, I was in my mid-20s and I was engaged, but didn't have a family. So coming back with a kid who was at school and, it's a different, completely different
Yeah,
beast. And it was for much longer as well, of course. I was going to be there for 15 months. Um, and we didn't know, was this going to be a permanent move or not? It was just a very different thing. So, but I think we all remember it, like it's definitely this sort of benchmark, this sort of reference point and touchstone in our lives. I think William, our son, would move back tomorrow.
yeah,
Deb and I have only been back to New York once since then for a weekend to premiere a bit of TV that I was in, and we didn't go with William, and he was absolutely furious with us. um, and but what I think we realized at the time was that there's only we thought long and hard about staying in the city after the show finished, but when you're there on somebody else's dime, basically, you housing budget built into your um um uh to your employment package,
mhm,
um and you're watching people you're sprinting to stand still in New York,
yeah,
and to have finished that job and then had to the reality is that we'd be um you know then paying our own way, living in a place that was a fraction of the size,
yeah,
hemorrhaging money in New York, trying to figure out where the next paycheck was coming from, and and love New York as we do. Um, we didn't necessarily want our relationship with the city to change in quite such a brutal way, because New York is amazing, but it is brutal. it's relentless, and nobody needs me to tell them that. Um, but I think we decided that it's let's keep New York as special and brilliant,
Hmm.
by doing it when circumstances are favorable,
Yeah.
because uh, it's bloody hard work otherwise.
Well, they are
Um,
bringing the Doctor to the Armory, and weren't you involved in that production in 2020?
I was, yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I
Mhm.
did the Doctor just as we went into lockdown. But then by the time it came around again, sadly, things didn't work out. So clashes and stuff. So um, I'm sure that will, excuse me, I'm sure that'll go down a storm. When's it starting? It's
Over the summer,
over the
June.
summer. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, I'll be I'll be in London back on stage. I'm very happy to say.
Oh,
Um,
maybe I should just
uh,
like move my trip to June to see you on stage and whatever.
well, it's not announced yet, but that is going to be happening, which is great. I'm thrilled about. It's been too long, so I'm really, really excited to be getting back on stage in London. Um, and but the Doctor's terrific, better writing. And Juliet's brilliant in it. And
The space they're performing in is a Park Avenue Armory. I don't know if you know of it in New York.
Park Avenue Armory.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't know that one.
Yeah, it looks like a huge castle on Park Avenue, and it's just this huge space. Kenneth Branagh did fuck, what did he do?
Oh, he did his Macbeth there.
Yeah, which I'm so pissed I missed. But I saw a play there called Judgment Day, and it's just this huge space, and it's just wild to me to perform stuff there, but in a good way.
Right.
So hopefully you'll come back to New York and something, God
I'd
willing.
love to. I absolutely love. Of course, I would love to. It would be amazing. It's always there's nothing like landing in New York.
Yeah,
Um, uh, and it was. I mean, the city's been through a lot since we left.
yeah,
A lot, and well, everywhere's been through a lot, I suppose. But uh, it was quite something to be watching it from a distance.
yeah.
You know. But
So-
yeah, sorry.
No, no, please continue with what you were saying.
No, I don't really know what it was I was going to say. I just that uh that relationship's never not going to be there now.
Mhm.
Um and it's strange. It is one of those places that even before you've been, you feel like you know it. So when you arrive for the first time, it already feels familiar. And
Mhm.
everybody's got nuts stories from landing in New York or just living there. Um
I mean, I do, and I lived here for many years. So,
yeah. Have you
um,
always lived in New York?
yeah, I'm from New York. I'm from Long Island, but I went to school in Manhattan, so I've been here since then, not to age myself, but yeah, I've lived in the city since I was 18.
Right, right. And you're living in Jersey now.
No, I can see New Jersey from my
Oh, you're
window.
seeing. Oh, well, it's all right. So you cross the river.
I got like very offended. No, New Jersey, but
No, no, no.
I live on, I call it like the cusp of Hell's Kitchen. I'm like right on the outskirt of it.
Oh,
So
great.
I'm like a 5 minute walk to Central Park. It's pretty nice,
Oh,
actually.
amazing,
Gives
amazing.
me access to all the places I want to walk to, like far enough from like Times Square, but like close enough to walk to a theater if I'm seeing a show,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
which is
brilliant.
always, which I got to do
I,
this past week, which is great.
I'll say this much. I think if I ever do come back to New York and I'm not in a show that makes it onto the Broadway softball league, I'll be absolutely heartbroken.
Oh,
That was that
Fizzy
the
Whizbees,
physics
right?
the physics was I was not expecting that to be such a big part of my life. It became this. I looked forward to Thursday mornings so much.
Yeah,
It was just glorious. But of course, part of that is having Paul Thornley as your skipper
yeah,
and all of that. But
yeah,
that was just it was like Bad News Bears. Um,
yeah.
which again, a movie I didn't know until I came to New York. But uh, this thing of we were all absolutely dreadful at it. In fact, I think they stopped the first match because out of mercy, because we were something like 25 points to 0 down or something like that.
You're
and we
just
just
like, we're British, we're used to cricket.
yeah, we didn't know the rules. We didn't know what we were doing. So we gradually got less and less bad. And
Mhm,
then there was one week where suddenly we went, oh, wait a minute, we're actually in this game. And the first time we actually won a game,
mhm.
you'd have thought it was like VE Day or something. It was just amazing. It was, as it's a completely fundamental memory of being in New York to me.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And talking about your the Broadway softball league on Jimmy Fallon
Yes,
and doing a magic trick on Fallon.
that was terrifying.
Yeah.
My God, I don't think I've ever been so stressed as trying to pull off that bloody balloon trick.
Yeah. I think I figured
Um,
out how the trick happened, but I don't want to give anything away just in case.
well, hashtag keep the secrets.
Exactly. Which I don't even think is a hashtag anymore at the show, but
No.
no,
Well, yes.
it's more like you've seen it, you know what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, just don't be an asshole.
And
If
give
somebody doesn't
anything
know,
away.
don't tell them. Right.
Yeah. So how did I actually love Tudor history. So I found out about Becoming Elizabeth when you posted about it on Instagram. So
Right.
I fell fucking in love with that show, and I'm kind of bummed it's not getting a second season.
Oh, it's a shame, isn't it? Yeah, we had had a really, really that was a kind of a theatre bunch as well because
Yeah.
Anya
Mhm.
Reese was writing and
Yeah,
you had
and
actors like
her production of The Seagull was just in the West
yeah,
End with Amelia Clark.
yeah, yeah, of course, and the likes of John Heffernan and Romola Garai and all those guys and Leo Bill's at the Almeida at the moment. It was just a really, really, really great bunch, and it was good fun. It saved our bacon over lockdown. I
Yeah.
didn't, and it was one of those ones that came up, and it was too much to hope for at the time. It was genuinely too much to hope for. But uh, when it came through, and I was talking it through with on the phone with my agent and everything, I was kind of my heart was breaking as she was telling me about it because I was going. I just at the time I couldn't believe that it was actually going to happen.
Mhm.
There was every reason to believe that it would all fall through by the time production actually started
Yeah.
because of COVID. And um, uh, the closer we got to it, the more I thought, oh God, the more gutted I was going to be when it happened. And even when it did actually start, I thought I was just braced for it to end. It just literally one day at a time. I thought we're going to be shut down at any moment. The House of Cards is going to collapse because it's just a common story you saw all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but somehow we got from one end to the other, and not only in those circumstances, but we had a brilliant time doing it.
Yeah.
And now Bella Ramsey's mega famous and all that stuff, and just it was
Mm.
just great fun. So yeah, we were all geared up for season two. We were looking forward to that, but sadly, it wasn't to be. It's just a shame. But
Yeah, they also Stars has this thing about like turning books of these well-known royal females into TV series, and they had the
yeah,
Serpent Queen, which I was like so bitter about because I'm like, watch this get a second season and Becoming Elizabeth doesn't, and that's what happened. But I started to watch the Serpent Queen. I haven't finished it, but I was like, this is actually really good. But Becoming Elizabeth was so different from all the other types of shows that they put out there about a royal, and I thought it was so good. I'm so
yeah.
bummed.
It was an interesting little corridor of history, wasn't it? That hasn't been covered in with anything like that kind of time scale, to get into it.
Mhm.
I was sorry about season two because I was really looking forward to the 9 days of Jane of Dudley trying to get Jane Grey
Yeah,
that's a really fascinating 9 days.
yeah,
Just where you see, Dudley's got all the cards. He's got the girl, he's got the son, he's got the keys to London, he's got the guns, he's got the guys, he's got the money, he's got all of it. He's got the lords in his pocket. Um, and Mary's got nothing, absolutely nothing,
mhm,
just faith. And over the course of those 9 days, just like one person goes and stands next to Mary, and just gradually, just the sand comes out
yeah,
from underneath Dudley, one grain at a time, and before you know it, it's just gone like smoke.
Yeah.
And it's like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
It would have been really fun to get into all of that, but some other time maybe. You never know.
I
Somebody
love
else will do it.
people were yes, so many people were like freaking out how good Romola Gary was in that show.
Yeah,
Which
she's great, isn't she?
yeah, she was so when I was in London years ago, the show that I saw in the West End, she was actually in. So the reason I saw that show was because she was in it. So the fact that she was in it and you were in it, I was very excited about it. But do you think John Dudley, um, was he good or bad? Or was he, I'm just curious to know like your characterization of the part
Well, I mean,
or Survivor.
well, the way Anya would describe him was like Silvio in The Sopranos, which I quite enjoyed. But I think nobody thinks they're the villain, do they? But they're all warlords,
Yeah.
and of course they're all products of their time. So you have that Elizabethan worldview
Mhm.
is as vertical a one and as patriarchal a one as you could hope to find anywhere in history, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, your question was the question was, is he a villain or is he a baddie? Is that essentially, was that?
Well, if you think he's good or bad or a survivor, what was your take on it? I mean, I have my feelings on it,
I
but I'm
think Survivor probably is a
curious.
good way of putting it, but I don't think he was content merely to survive.
Mhm.
He was definitely ambitious and opportunistic, and but it's not one of the fun things about trying to, we can build a Jacobean playhouse now, but we can't rebuild Jacobean eyesight.
Mhm.
We can tell these stories now, but part of the fun is trying to bridge that 400-year gap, because cynicism, the type of cynicism is it's not the same, in that we don't justify things to ourselves in quite the same way. We
Mhm.
might justify the same types of deeds,
Mhm.
and come to the same result, but our route there is necessarily a bit different. And um I liked sort of having to just slowly, in small ways, repeatedly, just sort of trying to remind myself about it was an honor based currency.
Mhm.
It's not just about gold, and it's not just about power. That a lot of there's this abstract at work, for the knightly classes, um, of honor, and part of what feeds that is ambition. You can do horrendous things in the name of the pursuit of honor and still be considered chivalrous.
Mhm.
You can leave no prisoners and still be heralded as gallant. And that's that. I mean, that contradictions at work in Henry V.
Yeah.
Um, and we see that, and so I enjoy the process of coming to an understanding with the past, which is not judging the past, um, in contemporary terms. Um, we can, for example, we can deconstruct useful things, but even if similar concepts existed 400 years ago, they would have been given very different names and had a very different vocabulary
Mhm.
and used very, very different structures of thought underneath them. Um, so I think I think we see Dudley today and we think he's a cynical power grabber and, um, uh, just an ambitious politician.
Yeah.
But I think I was, and that might be the end result. But I enjoyed sort of trying to think my way along a slightly more scenic route
Yeah.
as I went.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit because before we started recording, we talked about the stage door experience. Uh,
Mm.
and I showed you a photo of when I was in my youth. at the History Boys stage door
Yes.
and I stage doored Harry Potter, knowing that you probably wouldn't be coming out, which is completely understandable. But when it comes to stage dooring, what is your take on people's feelings of why this person didn't come out? They should have come out, if I'm wording that correctly. You understand what I'm saying, but I don't know if I'm wording it.
I think I think I don't particularly have an opinion on it, to be honest. I suppose is the honest answer. I think people probably because I'm inside it,
Mhm.
um uh people handle it in different ways. Um there's a lovely story, I don't know how much of it is true, about Daniel Craig, who's, you know, not the most outgoing populist of performers, being sort of slightly bewildered, not bewildered, not in terms of being surprised, but slightly sort of bowled over by the mega fame he hit after being cast as Bond, and struggling to cope with it, and then doing that two-hander with Hugh Jackman,
Mhm.
who is a past master at glad handing on the red carpet and at the stage door, and by all accounts was very good for Daniel Craig on that front, and helped him to relax into it and start to enjoy it, and all that. And there were people on Potter who were excellent at it, like that. Paul Thornley's like that.
Mhm.
Noma's brilliant at it. I've never enjoyed any of that stuff, and um, partly because it was always it was always a route to not being myself, um, performing. It was There's a line in Tar, the Kate Blanchett movie, where she talks about obliterating the self, and um, that is the sort of the ideal, the the paradox of wanting to get the really good parts and being ego driven enough to play the main parts. The paradox is that that's because you want to be busy
Mhm.
from the start of the show to the end. You want to be so busy that you don't have time to think about yourself anymore, and all of your attention is on um, achieving what you need to achieve from one end of the show to the other, and you forget about yourself. And
Mhm.
it's quite a meditative um, place in its ideal form, but of course it feeds the ego like nothing else on earth. Um, and so my stage door decision is probably a cop out and a justification at the same time. That I justify it by saying it's not about me anyway. Um, and I definitely don't enjoy making it about me. I'm not very good at interviews, as you might have noticed.
I think you're
um,
I've enjoyed the last God knows how long we've been talking, so you're
but
good.
it's but doing Jimmy Fallon was the most stressful experience. Oh my God, absolutely terrifying.
And then having to
Um,
perform a magic trick on the show as
yeah,
well.
just I mean, I don't, it's not about, again, like it's not about me, but that's a very handy and comfortable and within reach justification for not doing what a lot of actors do and just get on with it and do it. But on a practical level, when it came to Potter, I was fucking knackered at the end of the show, and I
You were
had to do
pottered
that.
out.
Yeah, I had to do it, and I had to come in and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah,
And if it was minus 16 outside, and I wasn't going to, and it was, it was next stop midnight,
yeah.
and I wasn't going to spend an hour outside talking in the freezing cold and then getting home and then having to get up and um get on with the next day. I don't see it as part of my job description.
Mhm.
Um it's But that said, when I was, you know, I did it too.
Mhm.
Um I got Judy Dench's um autograph after Amy's View. Um and I did it with various others as well, and I wouldn't trade that memory. I wouldn't trade remembering her being incredibly generous and feeling like I had all the time in the world with her.
Yeah.
Until she just gently but definitely left
Yeah.
and went home. Um, so I mean, with Potter, I felt like I just sort of made it kind of I feel like I could make a sort of blanket decision. In London, it was easy to make the decision because I had to get my train. I
Yeah.
had to just leave. I just had to leave. And in New York, I just made the decision that I wasn't going to, and I only very occasionally did because we would go to the pub or something. Anyway, so uh, but it was such a big monolithic block of schedule
Yeah.
in my life that I just sort of, having made that decision, I didn't really sort of think about it anymore. So I didn't get, but I was frankly, but some of the stuff I was braced for just never happened. I
Mhm.
was braced to get the question about um uh in Britain they're called public school boys, but
Mhm.
basically people who went to a fee paying school, private school, it would be called in America, um landing plum rolls,
Mhm.
whether it's Tom Hollander or Tom Hiddleston or Eddie Redmayne or any of these guys. Um, Nobody ever asked. So and no, and I was expecting to get a bit of kickback about the stage door thing, but no, it happened. Um, or at least if it did happen, I wasn't aware of it. So
Well, I think nowadays it's not what it was like 10 plus years ago. I think people are now more understanding of like the stage door experience, especially doing something like Potter. When an actor is doing what you did for, 3.5 hours each night or twice in one day. So I think people understand that you not coming out of a stage door is fine because,
well, Tom Cruise doesn't make it easy because
yeah.
he'll do 2 hours worth of the stuff when he turns up to Leicester Square.
Yeah.
But
There was a show on Broadway over 10 years ago called American Idiot, and the guy who played the lead, who was on stage for like 99% of the show, before the show even started on Broadway, he's like, "I'm not stage dooring. The show is kicking my ass. I'm not stage dooring. I'm sorry." So people just understood that he's not going to stage door because if you'd seen the show, it takes a lot out of you.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, that there's just, honestly, there's just a practical level to it where it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think it's different if you're
Mhm.
um I'd have found it a lot harder to do, or maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know. If you're 25,
Yeah.
probably feel that about things differently. But I was 40 nearly, or actually by that point,
Mhm.
and so you sort of you give slightly less of a shit by that point. You're just gonna go, oh, you're pissed off I didn't do the stage door. Sorry, I'll do it
Whoops.
on I'll do it on another one. But it's literally not part of my job. I don't think it's part of an actor's job description, and I admire people who can do it and who can do it well and easily and generously. But unless you're going to do it that well, it's not likely to be a good experience. If you're going to do it and you're going to, for a start, feel like you're doing it slightly under duress, or that you're self-defeating by doing it because you're helping to uh, deteriorate vocally, for instance, or something,
Mhm.
um, then it's just not going to end up being a. Or if you're too self-conscious to do it comfortably and make people feel comfortable as
Mhm.
they're doing selfies or whatever. Um, but yeah, it's not part of the theatrical contract.
Yeah.
Going back to Henry V, the odd thing about the Henry V thing is that the part I kind of there's part of me that always wanted to play the chorus more than I wanted to play Henry V, because the chorus in Henry V articulates the theatrical contract better than anyone else I've ever discovered, and just that's the best gig in show business, is to be able to stand on a stage and say directly to an audience, this is the deal.
Mhm.
you know think when we talk of horses that you see them, and all this work your thoughts stuff. it's just us. It's just props and costumes and bits and bobs, and no one's pretending otherwise. But if we take a moment and just agree to choose to believe this, even though it's bollocks, then something extraordinary might happen. And that happens in there. It doesn't happen out here with posters and gold pens and selfies and whatnot. That's lovely. It's fun. It's great, and it's a little memento. And yeah, it can add to the mix, but it's actually nothing to do with that. I don't think it's not part of that exchange.
Yeah.
It's not part of the ritual or the rite or the mystery. It's very, very definite and material by contrast. And so and like I say, I'm not very comfortable doing it. So I try to be as as gracious and generous as I can be if it when it comes up. But it's not a skill set that I've ever had the maturity to develop.
Yeah.
in a grown up way.
Much like when you're back on the stage in June, don't expect you to come out of the stage door.
No, I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Depends on the day.
Part of it's logistical. Like if I can get out of the theater without being seen, I will. But sometimes you just can't.
Yeah. Depends on the theater, which we don't know because we can't say anything yet. So a part of being like in these big shows comes awards. So you have an Olivier, and it was actually given to you by one of your History Boys brothers, I guess you could say. What was that experience like?
Mad. I mean, anyone who says that they haven't practiced their speech is lying. I mean, how do you? I mean, it's just without assuming that you are actually. I didn't think I was going to be nominated, let alone win, and I did not think I was going to win. But then it happened, and then I was like, "Fuck it up! Glad I practiced this," because otherwise, it's 60 seconds or 30 seconds that just disappears, and you like nothing happened. And there already were people that I'd forgotten, anyway. But it's again, they say that awards don't mean anything until you win one, and strangely, my experience was probably the exact reverse of that. I really wanted one. But having won one, now I'm much less fussed about it, only because they're lovely. And again, I'm trying to sound gracious and generous, and it's not like I want to give it back.
Yeah.
But they don't help. And no part of the awards giving process helps. And that was very apparent in New York, because you do these rounds of lunches because you don't win. You're nominated, not nominated, win, don't win. All of it gets in the way. It all gets in the way. It gets in between you and the other people in the company who may or may not have been nominated too, or may not have won.
Mm-hmm.
It interferes with the schedule, because while everybody else is doing yet another choreography call or something, you're at a Tony lunch at the Rainbow Room or somewhere, which is again all very nice, except it's quite awkward. And stressful, because you're surrounded by famous people doing this, that, and again, if you're not sort of the type who particularly, I'm not a politician.
Yeah.
I'm not a mixer, mover, and shaker. I never have been. Like a lot of actors, I'm quite gauche. I would not trade sitting next to Glenda Jackson at lunch for anything. My God, what
Yeah.
an amazing woman.
Mhm.
And what an amazing actress. So that was amazing. But
Mhm.
it just gets in the way. Because then you have to turn up late and you're in fucking lunch togs instead of work gear. And then there's all the build up and all
Yeah.
this bloody economy and currency that goes underneath it.
Mhm.
And all these interviews when you have to try and say this sort of soundbite within 5 seconds so that they can put it on the whatever. It's it's a skill. It's a set of skills that go hand in hand with playing that part in the industry, but it got nothing to do with the job that I signed up to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I found that I got progressively more and more self-conscious over the course of the run. And then if you do win,
Mhm.
then your award-winning performance in while
Mhm.
it's still turning up, at which point people turn up and they watch you kind of going, well,
Yeah.
now, okay, fine. Let me
Yeah.
see the award winning. Why am I not getting award winning?
Yeah. I remember I
Um,
was watching an interview with an actor who just won a Tony, and the show he was in won a bunch of Tonys. And they were saying, oh, you won the Tonys. He's like, oh, no, it's harder because now people are
yeah,
coming to the show like, all right, you won these Tonys. Let's see what you got.
yeah. It's like so 9 Olivier awards or 10. Honestly, I can't remember 10, whatever. It was some vast number of Olivier awards, and as I was saying with Paul in the couple of weeks afterwards, it sort of feels like they're sitting out there going 9. you know,
Yeah.
and it was sort of the Lord of the Rings effect slightly was that I was expecting it to sweep up on the production awards and justifiably, like deservedly so. I was not expecting it to get nominated for acting awards at all, let alone win them. Apart from maybe I thought Anto would get
Mhm.
probably swept up in it because he was a new broom
Mhm.
and was playing that kind of a part and people like to celebrate that and they like to they like to pick
Yeah.
the new puppy up
Mhm.
out of the group and that's great, but so I genuinely was not expecting to actually capitalize on that front myself as an individual. And it was probably easier in London than it was in New York.
Yeah.
Um,
You had a great reaction when your category was announced, when they announced Andrew Garfield, because you just screamed out Andrew Garfield.
right. I mean, okay, so you're in New York doing Angels in America when Donald Trump is president.
Yeah.
Like, not being funny, but it's not going to be me.
No, we can laugh at it now. We're out of it. We can laugh at it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fucking hell.
You also did a great Groban on stage, by the way.
yeah. That's they were lovely, both of them. They really, really generous and gracious. But
Yeah.
again, that wasn't, throwing all that stuff together. I mean, I don't, yeah. Uh, the I don't know. I just uh I remain kind of mystified by a lot of the memories that I have
Mhm.
of throwing together cloakwork for the Tony Awards at the Radio City Music Hall. That's going. Why is it broadcast across? It's broadcast nationwide, and about 0.001% of people in America have actually seen any of the shows that are
Well,
being.
it's for the theater lovers in like the Midwest who, can't afford to come to New York to see a show.
Yeah.
It's for the theater fans around the world.
It's wonderful. It's this, but this the whole experience feels so. Everything about it feels so disproportionate.
Mhm.
It's the just the sheer scale of it.
Yeah.
And it's at those times more than any other do I feel like just this kid from Darlington. like like what the fuck? This is like this is like 42nd Street or the sequence from something. going, what is going on? There are never more surreal out of body moments than award ceremonies. They're
Yeah.
just so odd, everything about them. Um, and I find myself sort of wandering around with a slightly dazed, half amused. I think I tried to buttonhole Lee Pace at one point and go. I really love *Halt and Catch Fire*, and I'm really gutted it was canned because it was brilliant. But he was on his way somewhere. He was probably trying to go to the loo or something. I don't know where he was going, but but it was really awkward. And like everything feels out of kilter at an award ceremony. It feels like you've done, when you do your shirt up and you're one button out of sync,
Yes.
and your whole shirt. It feels, everything about an award ceremony day feels like that. To me, I don't know, and it feels like it does that to the work when you turn up to the theater. You don't feel, you feel like you've got a rib out of place or something, and you just need. There's no amount of uh osteopathy or something that can click it back into place. It
Mhm.
feels sort of wrong. Um, but I know that I know that that's possibly an immature attitude to it, or that you should just go with it. But like I say, that those tiny handful of moments where you feel like, that I've had over my life, where you felt that's what theatre's for.
Mhm.
Can't describe it, but anyone who's there knows exactly what I was talking about. That thing could not be further away from either an award ceremony or a press night or a live recording.
Yeah.
Um, there's there's something very private about it. And uh, I don't know that awards help, but I'm not man enough to say that. In lieu of actually accepting an award if somebody is stupid enough to give me one. So, um, yeah, but it's how do you compare? Seriously, how do you how do you compare with Denzel Washington doing Iceman Cometh? Um, it's madness.
Yeah.
They're completely incomparable types of uh striving for success.
That was that year you as well with Iceman Cometh?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and that could be
No, I'm trying to remember
substitute
because,
name of play here, whatever it is.
well, no, because I think that was like the first award of the night, and I think I was very confused to why that was the first award of the night. And somebody wrote on my Facebook, so Denzel Washington can go home after he loses, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah.
It's I used to, I used to watch all of them. I used to, take sweepstakes, and I used to have opinions, and I used to um be militant about who I thought was most deserving.
Mhm.
Well, I think if they are ever going to do them, I think the category should be more interestingly set up. It should be best performance by an actor given the circumstances under which the production was undertaken, or best director of a. Did you see the state of the script when I first saw it?
You know what? I
Um,
think there should be like you should create your own awards called the Parkers and just come up with these different
yeah,
categories. With
best,
like
yeah,
best
best
play that
put,
started out as shit, but now is really good.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, worst snatching of defeat from the jaws of victory. We're gonna go. It was all there for the taking, and somehow you managed to fuck it up. You have to go out of your way to screw up a masterpiece, but some people do seem to manage it, and some people manage to make.
I saw a really terrible production of Hamlet many years ago, so I understand that.
There are a great many terrible productions of Hamlet.
Yeah,
It's
so bad.
yeah, but some people manage to spin gold out of flax somehow.
Mhm.
Some people have just got it. They've just got that thing.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not on X Factor, I don't think.
Is there any roles that you would want to play or any projects you would want to work on?
I've been very, very lucky that I've had I had an amazing run of it. There was 10 years where I kind of I got to take a few of them off.
Mhm.
Um, there was one I missed, where I'm too old for it now, but I would have liked to have played stand up in Journey's End. Um, but that didn't come through. But now I think there are but now there's one that I do still kind of have a little pin in, but I don't know. As time goes on, I think if it comes up, it comes up. Um, the times when I've tried to sort of crowbar my way into stuff, it never works out quite the way you think it's going to work out. It's never what you think it's going to be, for better or for worse.
Mhm.
Usually a combination of both. I've been greatly surprised doing stuff that I thought was going to be shit and turned out to be quite good, and other stuff that I had nothing but the best of intentions for and huge ambitions for artistically, and they just turned out to just be turkeys. Um, and excuse me, sorry, I did beg your pardon.
Okay.
And so going back to not gripping too hard, I think these things, if it comes up, it comes up. But I'd like to just get back to doing great writing, um, great plays from the canon, and also and great new writing. But it feels like I'd like to get back in touch with that sort of discovery and custodianship of that unbroken line from the first priests in ancient Greece right the way through to modern times, and that thing that affirms something transformative of worth, that's not just glib entertainment. Nothing wrong with glib entertainment,
Mhm.
but it's not very lasting.
Yeah.
Um, and it feels like the bottom has fallen out of the market of storytelling. There's not now, with streaming services and the internet and everything. It's everybody's storyteller now, and well, we all are storytellers anyway. And so, in one sense, nothing's changed. We're all still constantly updating our persona, and that was always the case. Um, and it's also true that if you're too rarefied and exclusive about theatre, then you just end up be giving it a bad name. Um, no one wants the sound of church when they go to theatre, but the best experiences in church are very similar to the best experiences in theatre. There's something um, spiritually rejuvenating about them. It's just that your vocabulary, your mode of describing it is different. Um, so to answer your question, I
To get
can't
back to
point to
something like that. Yeah.
I can't point to specific roles, but anything by a great writer that stood the test of time has got a good chance
Mhm.
of getting there. I think
Yeah.
something like that, anyway.
Was that like that for you when you did Cat on a Hot Tin Roof?
Yeah, I think so. I
Mhm.
think so. We had limited resources um, um, and everything, but it was I loved it. I think I think it really worked on its own terms. I was quite daunted by doing it because that was a crucial one from my childhood, growing up watching Paul fucking Newman.
Yeah.
Um, I met him once. Met him on History Boys. He
Oh,
came to see it more than once.
wow.
Um, and which literally took my breath away. I didn't know what to say. I turned into a complete idiot. I didn't say anything to him. I could because I couldn't. Thank God for Andy Knott standing next to me.
Yeah.
Um, because I was obsessed with him at the time. I had like 50 of his movies. So that was pretty wild. But yeah, so doing Cat Knocks in Roof was a big deal for me. So I'd love to do some Arthur Miller, some more Tennessee Williams, some more Stoppard, some more Alan Bennett. I'd definitely like to do some more Shakespeare and uh, yeah, all sorts of stuff. But
Do
I'd
you,
like to be busy. I like to be
you like,
busy from the moment the play starts to the moment the play ends. I want to be busy. Yeah.
do you have any top going theater experiences that you've seen that still stick with you? Or that maybe you even performed in?
I remember seeing two of them. We got Alan Armstrong in when I was growing up. I saw him play Sweeney Todd, and then I saw him play Willie Loman.
Oh, wow.
Probably
Very
in the space of
different.
about, God, that must have been in about space of about 2 years, I think, maybe three.
Mm.
Um, but they've always stayed with me. Because I didn't think I couldn't understand that what I was seeing was possible. I didn't understand how someone could do that.
Yeah.
I was like, how the fuck do you do that?
Yeah, especially those two roles that are so different.
Oh my God, yeah. And what blew my mind was was that my I saw Death of a Salesman at the King's Theatre in Edinburgh when it came up from London, and my sister had a flat behind the King's Theatre, and I sat in the pub before the show started, underage, I was still at school, and uh, Alan Armstrong was there, and he was having a steak in the pub and a pint, and I looked at my watch, and it was after the half. It was like 7:05, and I thought, and I saw him. He stood up. He finished last mouthful of his steak, stood up, and the last quarter of his pint, chucked it down the throat, and off he went into the theatre. And I went, fucking hell! And I went in and I watched him pull this absolutely genius performance. And by all accounts, that's sort of what he's like. He can piss about right up to the moment when somebody says action, and then just be brilliant.
Mhm.
I suppose that's experience coming from it. But there was part of me that thought one day I want to be able to have a pint at 7:05 and walk straight on and play Willie Loman and be that good. Because yeah, that mix between the utterly mundane and the completely extraordinary. I don't know. Listen, this has been absolutely lovely, but I think I'm afraid I'm going to have to call
Yeah,
time on it.
of course.
Um, uh, it's been absolutely brilliant. But do you think we've covered all bases?
I think so. I think so. Do you think we covered all bases? Is there
I
anything
think so. I don't think we went anywhere too bad.
else? Mhm.
I'm sure I'll find out if I said the wrong thing. The internet will let me know.
I'm sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You can stay on for a moment after I stop recording. And thank you for listening. And that's it.